rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Better than just listening for ourselves, do it. Sounds like a concert right there. Everyone, welcome and thank you for attending the school board meeting. Secretary Schaefer, you want to do the attendance?
I do. President Donnelly?
Here.
Vice President Griffith?
Here.
Secretary Schaefer? Here. Treasurer Bailey?
Here.
Trustee D'Alessandro?
Here.
Trustee Foster? Here. Trustee Hanser?
Present.
Thank you very much, everyone. Mr. Throne, any changes to the board agenda?
None.
Before you, item number 3 is the consent agenda. We have just a couple hires. We also have the minutes of the August 17th meeting. Would someone like to put that on, Mary?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there support? Dan, support? Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Prearranged request to address the board. This is a chance for Principal McDevitt to be talking to us about what's going on at Leonard Elementary School.
Thank you. I know that Mr. Donnelly said a lot of people were here to talk to the board. I like to think that they're all here to see the points of pride for Leonard Elementary. Being so early into the school year, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we have going on in our school improvement plan for this year. But when we go into our points of pride, we're going to focus a little bit on some of the things that we're very proud of from last year. We took a look at our survey data that comes out in the spring, and we went through that and looked at areas that we could be proud of, and some areas that we should look at of ways that we can create actionable items for. Some of the things that we noticed is that a high percentage of our parents would recommend Leonard Elementary to a family member seeking school for their children. A high percentage of parents rated the overall quality of Leonard Elementary as excellent. And we also had a high percentage of parents who indicated that teachers have a high standard for their students. Some of the actionable items that we looked at was that we would like to find ways to increase our participation in the survey data collection. We didn't have a large turnout as far as parent participation in that survey, in that particular survey anyway. We also want to find ways, and that's one of our action items for sure this year, is to find ways to involve our families in the school community through the functions and activities and opportunities to volunteer that we've grown to really love and help us grow together as a family. Last year was a difficult year that we weren't able to enjoy a lot of those connections that we make with our parents and our kids through some of our annual events and spring fairs and things like that. So we're looking for ways to reconnect this year. Looking at some of our staff in our survey, a large percentage of our staff indicated that Leonard has a high learning standards. They believe that our teachers set high expectations for our students, and they believe that staff members and their families treat each other with respect. Some of the actionable items that we found were that we really thought that some of our future professional learning should be focused on student behavior, social, and emotional health. We also want to look to improve our modes of communication, such as our technology, school haiku page, the staff newsletter, etc. Looking at our school improvement plan on some of the goals we have for this year, we are reorganizing our school-wide system of support by implementing what we are calling win time. and that stands for what I need. And this is the time in the daily schedule where we can focus on the needs of all students. Many times in the past, we've put a lot of our energy, rightfully so, into identifying struggling students and finding interventionists and support people to work with those struggling students. Part of the student time is up to also include every student, even those the very high achievers, finding what they need. So we're putting that schedule into our day, very similar to a special schedule, like a music class or an art class or PE. We have wind time scheduled in our classes every day for our teachers, our interventionists, our MTSS team, our district curriculum coaches to work with our teachers to find what each student needs to meet their potential. It is part of our MTSS process. This year, we are going to focus on math and improving our math interventions. We have our individual reading plans, intervention plans, our IRIPs for our students. We are working on developing our IMIPs this year, which will be intervention plans in math. The wind time provides flexibility and opportunities for creativity. That's one of the most important parts about it, is it's going to evolve over the course of this year and in years to come. With the collaboration between classroom teachers, the instructional support staff, our resource teachers, our district instructional coaches, and everybody along the way that we can involve in that wind time. Another one of our goals in our school improvement plan this year is to take intentional action using our data. We've already started professional development this year, the use of EduClimber for our teachers and instructional staff to analyze the data that we have through our many assessments that we give throughout the year. Using this, we're going to create action plans, such as I mentioned, our individual math intervention plans based on this data analyzation. Also, another one of our goals is to implement and improve our positive behavior support system throughout the school, our PBIS initiative this year. Looking back at last year, some of our points of pride was that our staff, students, parents, and community came together, and I would like to say, turned lemons into lemonade. Nobody really knew in July last year what we were going to be doing as far as school goes, and whether or not we were going to be face-to-face, or if we were, how long it was going to last, and when we were going to have to possibly go remote. A lot of other districts were choosing to go remote, and there was a lot of uncertainty. And I would say that our biggest point of pride was overcoming that uncertainty, coming back face-to-face, having the kids and the teachers and the staff in school every day. At Leonard, we had an excellent attendance rate. We had very minimal disruptions throughout the year to our learning process. Our full staff returned to school and remained positive, upbeat, cohesive throughout the entire year. Our parents were very grateful, and they respected the new procedures and boundaries. None of us were really happy about some of the restrictions as far as what COVID and we were dealt, but we came together and made a really good situation. You can see some of the pictures out there. We had to change the way we do our annual Halloween parade at Leonard, but still was a great experience for the kids. In some ways, there's some things that we took away that were even better than past years. Our giving tree around the holiday time was once again a huge success. We had to change the way we do things. Folks were able to come in and grab paper ornaments off the tree. We had to do it in a digital way, but it turned out fantastic. In some ways, we took away some things that we may implement for future years from that as well. We capitalized on the face-to-face learning environment. We continued with our individual and small group instruction. We got better at it last year as the year went on. We used our multi-tier system of support, our MTSS process, to close the gap with many students, because coming into the school year last year, after a disruption the year before, students moving back and forth from MOBA to seated and vice versa, there were many students where we saw that there was some learning loss and some gaps, so we worked really hard in that face-to-face every single day with our teachers and our support staff and our MTSS process to close that gap. We provided not only academic, but also our social and emotional supports that so many kids needed, and families, with our social workers, our family school liaisons, and our teachers. Our parents participated in activities that were done a little bit differently to increase that participation. Our exhibition last year we did outdoors, and it was fantastic. As you can see some of the pictures I have up there. On our playground, we had all of our students set up their displays and have their exhibition, and they worked really hard on their speeches, and the parents all came and were able to walk around and see all the presentations, and it turned out fantastic. And as you can see in the corner, we have one picture of one boy did a presentation on school funding. I'm sure the school board would have really appreciated his take on it and how it works. We also had a fantastic 5th grade graduation ceremony. It's different than we had done in past years. We normally do it in June. We considered doing it at the middle school, the high school. We ended up doing it right at Leonard Elementary. And, to be honest with you, outside in the fields by the playground, it almost looked like a big outdoor wedding. We had all the seating set up in the stage, and it was really cool. It turned out great. We also, as I said, had our Halloween parade, our giving tree. We did a digital talent show that was a lot of fun. It allowed kids to do different things that they couldn't normally do in the gym as a traditional talent show. We got to see people riding their horses on their equestrian, some computer-aided design things that some students put together as their talent. So there were some neat new things that came about, the new way of doing things. Our student council still ran. We did elections. We elected president and vice president. They did a wonderful job. We still had our safety patrol. A lot of our celebrations throughout the year. Our March 3 month was a big hit. We did a campground theme, and we typically our staff puts together skits throughout the month that we do in front of the school. This year we did those skits. We came in before school and recorded them and made little movies out of them and played with the students, and it turned out great. Our PTO worked really hard to find ways to make community connections with the school, and they did a fantastic job. We had a lot of fundraisers that went really well, and a lot of the events with the kids, our fun run, things like that, the PTO put a lot of work into. And, to be honest with you, last year it was some thankless work because we weren't able to have the whole school together with the PTO kind of shining like they normally do. They were more in the background, and I just applaud the PTO for the work that they did in the background for us. Most importantly, though, the students, our point of pride is the friendships, the fun, and the smiles that we had last year. And with that, I believe that concludes. Thank you very much.
Great job making lemonade. Anybody on the board have a comment? Dan, please.
Just a couple questions as well. So I think the challenge last year, this year, is I think what everybody's facing. How do you provide normalcy in a non-normal environment? I mean, you're seeing it everywhere from restaurants to businesses and everything. They're changing the way that they do things. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity or the luxury of saying, okay, we want to create this. We have rules and steps that we need to follow. I think what you've done here is you've tried to create some normalcy for students, and that's what we have to do as educators, because at the end of the day, everything else on the side, our task is to educate. One of the things that as I was going through this earlier last week, is how do we see an increase in students that needed additional intervention because of everything that was going on, pandemic, in school. We were in school for the majority, but we had a couple opportunities we were not in school because the state shut everything down. Do we see an increase in that, and are we staffed properly to handle that then and more so now, if that's continuing to be a problem?
Well, we definitely saw it in both the younger kids and the older kids. I would say, the younger kids, that disruption from 2020, when they were in kindergarten, really the last few months of kindergarten is when they really start making those gains. the beginning of the year, they're learning routines, learning letters, learning sounds, and then that reading just starts coming around in February, March, and that's when the kindergarten really starts to blossom. And to lose that opportunity, that year we were shut down, and then come back as first graders. And first grade has a whole different type of expectations for reading and what their curriculum is. And for those first grade teachers, the amount of work that they had to put in backfilling and preparing them to move on, at the end of the year for second grade, it was a lot of work. And then when we talk about some of the older kids, when you get to fourth and fifth grade, you pretty much already know how to read. And a lot of your reading now is to learn, not so much learning to read, but reading to learn. But, when you're in that kind of shutdown mode and not knowing if you're coming back and, doing things remote and stuff, there's some lethargic thinking that comes in. It's hard for kids to put a lot of energy into their learning. And so to try to get that back took us a little bit of time to get them back into the swing of, 7 hours a day, every day. This is important, and keep your focus and things like that. So there was, definitely a lot of challenges last year. And yeah, with our wonderful teaching staff and support staff and the processes that we already had in place, we were able to, put together a pretty solid game plan to work on those deficits that we saw.
Thank you, Paul.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
As board treasurer, I have to ask, did the young man that did his exhibition on the board, the school funding, get an A?
We don't get A's, but we got a very good report on that.
Okay.
Awesome. Anyone else? Yes, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. I will say I do miss the cider and donuts. So hopefully we'll be able to get back there next year. I'm really excited about everything that you did, being able to come together. I think it just shows the value of the team, your leadership and your team and the district leadership, to be able to make the changes that you needed to make within the boundaries that we have and jumping right into it and getting it done. So thank you so much for that.
Anyone else? Great job, sir. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Chad's got something. Hold on, I missed it.
Hey, Paul. So right there near the end, you mentioned the PTO. Do me a favor, go back to them and let them know it's not a thankless job. I hope I don't overstep my bounds, but I think I can speak for the board and say that we appreciate what your PTO did, as well as all the other PTOs and organizations like the Boosters. That really feels like the community coming together to give the kids what they really need, keep the community together. So we appreciate everything they did.
Yes. Thank you, Paul. All right, we move on to number 5, Board of Education Matters, and Jill has asked me to let every one of you know that we had another graduate from Graduation Alliance, and she says we're somewhere between 28 and 30 students. And just a reminder to the community that this particular district does Graduation Alliance, Crossroads, and Bridges. All 3 non-traditional learning environments, because we're trying to supply an education to every child in the district. So the Graduation Alliance is one of the newest programs that we started about 3 years ago, Jill, and 10 graduates a year on average, not a bad average to have. Children that wouldn't have an opportunity in a lot of other school districts. So thank you. We go on to B, MASB Delegate Assembly Recommendations. Mary Hanser, I recall having an email where you have said you would be willing to be one of those delegates.
Yes, sir, that is true.
All right.
I am attending the annual leadership conference and would be glad to represent our district there.
Awesome. And we do have room for a second if there is someone else on the board that wants to also be a delegate. If not, we can make this motion with Mary's name only. So this would be an opportunity or a time for someone to say that they would like to also be on. All right, so if you would, Pete, whoever's going to read it, make sure you put Mary Hanser's name in there and don't do the and. Heather?
I'll read it. Move to approve Mary Hanser to represent Oxford Community Schools Board of Education at the MASB 2021 Delegate Assembly on Thursday, November 11, 2021.
Thank you. Is there support? Eric, support? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We move on to the Oxford Township Safety Path Easement Approval. Would someone please put that motion on the table? Dan?
Move to approve grant and permit easement to Oxford Township for a safety path along Ray Road as presented.
Is there support? Mary, support? Discussion? Yes, Mary.
Can I reread that?
Can you? Yes, go ahead.
Move to approve a grant. Move to approve to grant a permanent easement to Oxford Township for a safety path along Ray Road as presented.
Very good. And you still have the same second? We're good? All right. Now someone had their hand up for discussion. Mary?
So I just wanted to clarify, this is for the easement so they can use our property to build it, because we already approved a contribution for this previously.
Correct.
Okay, great,
Correct.
because I was wondering when they were going to get started, so I'm excited. Thank you.
That's what that's for. Chad?
So by approving the easement, we're essentially making that piece of the land property of the township, correct? And where I'm going with that is just from an angle of liability, if somebody gets hurt on the path. Okay. Thank you.
Corey?
Does this landlock us or any long-term, if for some reason down the road we ever sold that property or wanted to make a change, would there be any detriment here?
No, I think we would just go back to the township, and if we wanted to undo something, we would just ask to undo it.
Okay.
It also, by granting them the easement, they're also responsible for the maintenance, because it's not on solely owned property of ours.
So kind of a follow-up, they also would hold the liability, so if somebody was injured or hurt on that, the liability wouldn't fall?
I believe so, yep.
Okay.
Question.
Dan?
Just so that I'm clear, we're talking about the easement that's along Ray Road that extends by the new property that we're clearing.
No.
No.
We're talking about the one
Up here in the
north
corner.
of the baseball field that would go.
Yep, by the
Baseball field
retention
Okay.
pond.
by the retention
I
pond,
just
yep.
wanted to be clear,
Yep,
because there's been some conversation about us replacing the sidewalk that we removed as
Yep.
I just wanted to be sure.
has nothing to do with that.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We move on to D, our boiler issue at Lakeville Elementary School. Someone put that motion on the floor, please. Eric?
Move to approve the emergency purchase and installation of a new boiler for Lakeville Elementary School with a total cost of $64,120 as presented.
Is there support? Heather, support? Any discussion? Mary?
Can we just get a quick synopsis of what brought this on?
Quick would be the boiler broke.
That's what I said, I wanted to take the heat for it.
I knew it.
Sorry.
I asked the wrong.
Mary, thanks for teeing that up for him.
That was 20 years old, that boiler, correct?
To be honest with you, I don't know all the details when Tony got into it, how old the boiler was. I just know that it could not be repaired. And yeah, it fell under that emergency repair kind of situation. And so he did go out and get, numerous price estimates and all that kind of stuff with the type of boiler we wanted to go with. And I believe we have this boiler in, I don't know, at least a couple of our other schools.
Okay.
But exactly what blew up or broke, I don't have that for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious that we didn't have it marked before or anything. I mean, things do happen. I was just curious, because aren't we doing we're doing an inventory of the service on the equipment?
Yes,
Right?
yeah,
So we've
Tony's
been
been
going through the
going through all
buildings, just checking, so we
Yep.
can get everything on a list for when it might
Yep.
need to be replaced, so we just hadn't gotten here yet.
Correct.
Okay. That was really the question I was asking.
Thank you, Mary. Dan, did you have a question? Did I see your hand up?
Nope.
Okay, anyone else? Corey?
What is the time frame on getting that?
I think they're already in the process. Some components were in stock, some were not. It has not been completed yet, but they're well on their way. I'll say it that way. Sam, are you out there? Sam, any idea on estimate for completion?
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Throne, your name's next to this one, so maybe you might want to speak to it first.
So this is just, we needed a new backup system for our online software applications, and so this is a 5-year deal to do that. And yeah, we need to start backing up and have those backups available to us. So,
All right, thank you. Someone want to put this motion on the floor, please? Chad?
Move to approve the purchase of Veeam backup system for Microsoft Office 365 from CDW Government for the total amount of $39,884 as presented.
Thank you very much. Support? Eric, support? Discussion. Dan?
Just a quick question. Tim, you had mentioned this is a 5-year.
yep,
Is this a 39,884 earmarked for each year, or is that paid up front, 39,000 spread over 5 years?
yes, your second.
Yes, it's spread over 5
The
years.
second
Yep.
one,
All
yeah.
right, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
And Tim, I think, so we had talked a little bit about this week, right? So,
Yep,
so the vendor's only going to provide so much of a backup.
correct,
This is going to supplement that in the event that
correct.
once the Microsoft backup rolls off,
Yep.
as we all know it happens, right? This will give us the ability to pull that stuff down. It'll also give us the ability to spin up new machines quickly in the case of a hardware failure.
Correct. I'll say it this way. Over the last year and a half, unfortunately, many public institutions, including public schools as well as local governments, were attacked with ransomware. And part of our annual process that we did in the spring and summertime is to go through with our liability insurance carrier. Are there any areas that, worst case scenario, we lose that backup or what have you? What will it take to keep us in business? And so this was, since it was new software that we're employing, it was simply a hole that we found that we weren't backing up the way that we needed to ensure that if we had lost everything else, we still wouldn't be able to get back. And so this helps us fulfill that role.
Good, thank you, Tim. And I think it's worth noting that the ransomware cyber attacks have increased dramatically over
Yes.
the last year or two.
Big time.
So yeah, we definitely need to be prepared.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Anything else? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Weaver is going to come up and take over the whole section 6 on curriculum instruction. For those of you who have not typically been to a board meeting, especially this time of the year, one of the responsibilities the board has is to review the curriculum, new curriculum, added features to curriculum that every year. And so some of them are multiple pages. And so we go through these with Ken and to get the formal approval so that they can do the things they need to do. So Ken, please.
Thank you. This is an important task for the board. We appreciate all that you do with this. Quickly, before we get started with presentations, I had shared with you and Angela had shared with you an email and the link to get into Atlas, which is the curriculum software, as well as you saw the curriculum actually in the board packet as well too. You can access it either way. We'll continue doing that. But we thought I'd give you maybe a little bit different view of the curriculum, as well as you have the ability to see all of the curriculum if you want to go through it. I just wanted to offer, if you need any assistance with that, if you had any difficulty with that, or if you just want to learn a little bit how to navigate around in it, I would certainly help you with that. So just send me an email and be happy to help out. So the first presentation is going to be biology and a little bit of science curriculum presentation as well too. These folks have been working very hard, and I'm going to let Mr. Eldridge come up with his crew, Mrs. Grambo and Mrs. Duff, and we'll go ahead and let them do first.
Thank you for having us and hearing what we have to say and the work that our teachers have been doing over the last few years. It's been a process, but we're excited to finally make it up here and show you guys what we've been working on. So as you know, in 2015 in November, the state adopted new science standards. Those have not come without any hiccups. Over the last few years, we've seen a major shift in the way that we are asked to deliver science instruction. Really a need to reshift how the new standards fit within the courses that we currently offer. And it was decided that we would embed earth science standards into our current classes, which are biology as a 9th grader, chemistry as a sophomore, and physics as a junior. So we've decided to kind of take that 3-course model and embed earth science standards there. And really one of the biggest things we've had to overcome over the last few years is just a lack of available quality curriculum materials. There are a lot of materials out there that are, they say, aligned to the next generation science standards, which are pretty much the same as the Michigan science standards. But none of them were really developed with putting the student as the learner in mind. So we've kind of been patiently waiting for those, but we do have some things that have come forward. So part of our process, even as we waited for those resources to come alive, we all at the time went through, well, most teachers at the high school went through, and middle school as well, this NGSS training, which basically put us in a role of learner as well as kind of teacher, and we kind of switching in and out of those roles and thinking of what it looks like to be a scientist. Obviously, we spent some time with course sequencing, taking time with those standards, and bundling our curriculum. As resources became available, we spent time looking through them and deciding whether they were good enough for us. And when we did find some stuff, we put it through some pilots and ultimately wrote some curriculum. And today we'll bring you biology, and I have an update for chemistry and physics later. And pass over to the people who make it happen. This is Lauren.
Hi, everyone. This is actually our 3rd year using the materials that we're presenting to you today. Obviously, last year was a bit challenging with COVID and distancing and being on the computer, but we really are enjoying the approach that the NGSS brought to teaching science. It's a storyline-based approach, which means each unit that we do has an anchoring phenomenon. In this case, our anchoring phenomenon is a story about a little girl, which we'll get to in a little bit, but it has the students experience either a video or something that happens in nature, and then we work together to ask questions and to answer those questions in order to understand what we saw in our anchoring phenomenon. So in biology, there are 3 main units. We're adopting a curriculum from iHub, and they created the materials we are working with ecosystems, inheritance and variation of traits, which is essentially genetics, and evolution and natural selection. The first unit we piloted 3 years ago was evolution and natural selection, and we were able to teach it again last year, and we're in the middle of it this year. So we felt that we had the best understanding of how that unit works in order to present to you. We've tried this 3 times now. With COVID, we had to cut short the other units and kind of do some maneuvering. So this is the one that we really have the best grasp on. So what we do first is the students watch a video. In this case, it's about a little girl who gets a bacterial infection. And she ends up in the hospital, and that infection becomes resistant to the antibiotics the doctors are trying to help her with. And she gets to the point where she's so sick that she needs a lung transplant. So the students watch the video of Addie, an 11-year-old girl. It is a little bit, it's tough because she does end up in the hospital, and it talks about her health scares and things like that. They ask questions on the video that they watched, and we use that to create what's called a driving question board. We use those questions to drive our lessons. So if the students want to learn what antibiotics do, because they need to understand that to know what happened to Addie, we make that a question, and we build a lesson around that. A lot of those lessons are already created because as teachers we can anticipate what they're going to ask, but sometimes it allows us to sort of be flexible. If they feel like they already understand something, we make sure that they do through formative assessment, and we can move on to something else if we need to. The biggest thing that I think is really helpful is it takes a modeling approach. So the students create a model for what they think is happening inside Addie as she's getting sick and better. This was very scary for me, even as a teacher who's been teaching for a long time, because I didn't have experience with it. But I can just tell you that when we get to the second unit and they're asked to create models, they're so confident and they really have the skills, even with just having a one-time scaffolded by us. So I was really impressed with that part of the curriculum, and I think it's a valuable skill for the students. They can use models to understand anything in science, and we're just teaching them some ways to do that. Keep going. I kind of went on this a little bit. So investigating not only what happened to Addie in the video and researching, but we've done bacterial experiments this week at school, in fact, where we actually apply antibiotics in a safe way to bacteria that we find around the school. And they can actually get some hands-on experience as well, so that's built into the curriculum. And the idea is to help them to understand what antibiotic resistance is, how it works, and then how we can prevent those kind of things from happening to them. Because Addie was just a normal 11-year-old who got a cut at the playground and got very sick. So we want to talk about also being safe from infection, learning about antibiotics, vaccines, and sanitizer. The things that we're doing to prevent anyone from getting COVID really kind of shape their understanding of how not to get sick and what kind of things we can do. So they're really connecting to it, especially the last 2 years, with all the things we've learned about COVID. So the main ideas that they figure out by the end of the unit is that when things change in the physical environment, it can cause changes in organisms. So when you apply antibiotics to bacteria, there are changes that happen, and those bacteria can become resistant. We also talk about how it's all about the genes and the DNA that the bacteria have, and that the bacteria have different survival naturally, and the ones that have a lower level of adaptation or survival die, and the ones that are stronger, as we say, survive. And that's what causes the infection over time to become harder to treat. We really focus on modeling as a summative assessment. So they actually create a final model using a very specific rubric where they make sure they have everything they need to explain what happened to Addie in a big picture, infographic with words. And we grade them on that and give them the chance to revise that multiple times over the semester. And we also have sort of a more traditional test where there will be some multiple choice, but it's a lot of questions where they need to do calculations or they need to write pre-response questions so we can truly see that they understand what's going on. Okay.
And so that is pretty much the biology and what we've been working on in a nutshell. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update on chemistry and physics. So biology was the first course that actually had some resources start to be developed for. Chemistry and physics have lagged behind by about 3 or 4 years. So just to give you guys a quick update, in May of last year, an opportunity pretty much the same group who put together the resource biology really liked. A group called Open SciEd, which is kind of a larger group that has contracted out some work with the people who made the iHub. There was an opportunity to field test some new units for physics and chemistry. So we are actively working through that field test right now. Physics is working through, as their anchoring phenomena, the blackout that happened in Texas, kind of learning about electrical energy and how energy flows throughout systems, and what happens when the systems fail. And then, can't remember chemistry. So that's just a quick update, and obviously we'll be back with chemistry and physics hopefully soon.
Thank you very much for your hard work. Anybody have any comments or questions before we put the motion on? Dan?
Quick question. So these anchoring phenomena, are they something that would have already happened in society, and then a group, or who chooses them, number one? And number two, they're real life situations where we have to kind of focus how to prevent either another blackout or bacteria or anything like that from growing. I mean, you can go to the wrestling room and probably have a great study place for that, or the locker room. But I guess what I'm trying to say is these anchoring phenomena are selected by a group, correct, outside of our district, and you may have a list of them. Just explain how we come up with those anchoring phenomena.
So the anchoring phenomenon doesn't have to be anything overly complex. It just has to make you take pause, or make you start to ask questions. Okay, so for the example of a little girl Abby, well, why is Abby so sick? What has happened to her? She looks normal in the video. She just got caught in the playground, and then she ends up, pretty sick. Obviously, this came out well before our current state, right? But it's just anything that can cause us to ask questions, because that really is the first part of the new way we're trying to do science, is to get kids asking questions, as opposed to us just telling them, hey, this is what you need to know. It's more of putting you in the role of asking the questions and actually doing the science and really leading your own learning. So that's really what we're doing with that anchoring phenomenon. Now, there are lists, we can change them. I mean, these are just the ways in which we currently use them.
Can I add that we also have brought engineering into the picture, so science is understanding and engineering solving problems. So one of the big pushes of NGSS is not just knowing about it, but how can we fix it? And they design ways to fix it, or even just talk about how can I prevent antibiotic resistance from happening to me or my family. So it does bring in sort of a closure to it that maybe wasn't evident when we talked before about it.
And I like the idea of, because, if you take too many antibiotics, your body builds up a resistance, as we know from, anytime you are, maybe get penicillin or whatever when you're a young kid, and then all of a sudden you're all constantly taking it, then that penicillin may not work for your system. I think it's important that we're teaching that health issue, not just during, the COVID era, but how do we create better, healthy lifestyles to get our kids from point A to point B, whether it be from middle school all the way through high school, and just kind of prevent some things that they can use later on in life. So it's good. Those are good things to kind of touch upon.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Eric?
You said the word engineering, so you caught my attention.
You had me at engineering.
It's a very dynamic way of teaching, right? So constantly changing and different all the time. Is there anything that any lessons learned or anything that any surprises you may have had during this method of teaching that that you kind of take each moment every day?
Yeah, like I said, this isn't traditionally how we've taught in the past, or we've been taught to teach, although it's been in the works for a while. I have been really surprised that I myself am getting better at guiding the way they question and making sure they write quality questions to start out with. We kind of trick them a little bit, like I said, we know where we want things to go, so we can pull out certain questions from them that we want to see. And there is really a set path through the unit, where we actually do sometimes say, okay, we have to learn about this in order to understand it. So we still have the ability to put in, hey, we're gonna find out what this does today, even though you didn't deliberately ask me about it. And then in the end, really talking about the solutions like Dan mentioned is what can they do to move forward. When we talk about engineering in our wing, it's not necessarily always creating a product in the end, which is what I always pictured engineering to be. And then I mentioned before, I was impressed at their ability to make these models that were difficult for me to make as a veteran teacher. I sort of stared at my piece of paper and didn't know what to do either. And then after the scaffolding that they help us do with the students, they're creating these very elaborate understandings of what's going on that I don't even know that I could have created, you know, myself without the curriculum helping us do that. So,
Thank you, appreciate it.
Anyone else? Mary?
Thank you for the presentation. It's really exciting to see that we can't find what we need, so we're making it happen. Based on the knowledge that we have and, you know, and the resources that we have, which here is our people. It's also really exciting that kids are being engaged, the students are being engaged, and these are things that they can relate to. The lifelong school question is, why do I care? Why do I have to learn this stuff? Who cares? And this gives us a reason. This is why we care, you know, because it also helps expand the students, I think, into more than their bubble. You know, if we can relate things to what is happening in the world today or things that have happened recently, you know, that they can realize that there's more than just right here. So I think that's a fantastic way to do it. And creating questions, helping to create that inquirer, right, or feeding that inquirer, you know, a lot of portrait of graduate pieces in this.
yeah, I think that's the biggest piece is we're moving away from, you need to understand what an amino acid is. I can Google that. But asking the right questions and finding the information from the right sources has always been a problem. So we've been working on that as well, and I think that speaks to your idea that these are skills they can take outside of the classroom. Again, I do have AP Bio memorizing amino acids, but we gotta do that. Maybe that's not for ninth graders. So having that ability to ask appropriate questions and find the answers in the right places is another big takeaway from this that I think is great.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ken, anything else?
I just would like to thank the science department.
Yes, thank you.
This has been a long journey. We wanted to explain a little bit why when the standards came out in 2015, you're just now seeing the curriculum
coming to before you, and the chemistry and physics is still coming. It's because we spent 2 years or a little bit more than that just learning how to teach this method, and they did a fantastic job. They went to summer, some of them went after school and on Saturdays and stuff like that, and they just did a fantastic job, and it was quite an endeavor to do that, and they've been just fantastic. And then we were waiting for actual materials because it's always helpful to have a little bit to go from, and nothing high school was really coming out. And like Mr. Aldridge said, you know, that working through all of that, and then finally, just about a year ago or so, we started to see the actual, we started to write our own. We're bundling standards and doing all of this stuff and getting ready, and it's quite a big process. And just as just as we were full bore into that, all of a sudden here comes the high school stuff. So Mr. Eldridge has been fantastic. He's a phenomenal science coach. He's done absolutely amazing. It's like, hey, he realized even as much work as we've done, we need to look at this. And we did an about face a little bit, and now we're here before you today with Bio. I just want to thank him again. They've been awesome.
And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you too for your hard work. Thank you so much. Would someone like to put this motion on the floor? Mary?
Move to approve the biology curriculum for Oxford High School as presented.
Is there support? Eric, support? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. World history?
They are up next.
Thank you, everyone.
So we've got Mr. News is coming up, and some of his
This is Kurt's sweet spot.
people, yeah. I'll let him go ahead and introduce these people. This is another group that's been working hard. We've got some major shifts. I don't want to spoil any of your plans.
Biology, the science curriculum actually set the table pretty well in my wheelhouse. I am, for those of you who don't know, a curriculum nerd, and it's nice to see everybody who's paying for social studies curriculum. But, it's something I think I do well and I love, although I found out very quickly, because of last year, that there are people who are a lot better at it than I am, and I'm glad they took the lead. So I'm going to introduce pretty quickly the three rock stars who put the curriculum that they're going to put forward, but you will find that it's an inquiry-based curriculum. In 2014, the state of Michigan, actually in 2013, they started debating new social studies standards to be passed in 2014, and then they couldn't agree in 2015. In 2019, they finally said, oh, let's just have the ones that we currently have, but they also worked on, as a national piece, a career, college, and civic readiness and preparedness curriculum all at the same time, which is inquiry-based. So our curriculum is based on both the Michigan standards, but it's really founded in the skills of the C3 curriculum, which are really critical thinking, disciplinary literacy, inquiry, and discourse. And so the work that they did, while content is still very important, it also focuses on building those critical skills that they're going to need to be functional citizens inside the United States, to be able to develop their own questions and find out how to answer the questions. So without further ado, I will introduce our three curriculum presenters, Katie Blazek, Lauren Jasinski, and Andrea Shell. I think you'll find that they have a lot of passion and really live it by providing kids, as we've always been proud of, but even more so, even more recently, picking up our kids' ability to take action and get involved. So without further ado, the three runners.
I'm Andrea Shallett. This is my 12th year teaching at Oxford Community Schools, certified in social studies and history, and I have a master's in education technology.
I'm Katie Blazek. I've been here for 14 years. I'm also certified in social studies, history, Spanish, and speech, and I have a master's degree in history.
And I'm Lauren Jasinski. This is my 10th year in Oxford, 9th year of high school. I'm certified in both social studies and ELA, which is a good background for the work we've been doing.
So, as Mr. News pointed out, this has been a journey, kind of similar to what we saw with the science curriculum before us. When the state standards started to kind of roll out, we were told, okay, it's time to revise, and then the states decided they wanted to work on those standards. So we just kept saying to Mr. Weaver, they're not done yet. And so we just kind of kept pushing it down the road, kind of also giving us an opportunity to really kind of get comfortable, because I mean, early on, obviously we were all still young teachers and things like that. So we were fortunate to have that experience. When we started to get to the point where we were ready to do this, there was a lot of conversation that we had. We did make a change in our department scope and sequence, which Lauren's going to talk about in just a couple minutes. We did pilot some resources that were provided from some different companies. We tried to teach TCI pilot as well as Muzella in the 2019-20 school year. Obviously, that got interrupted at the end of the school year by our closure. However, we did use some of those resources in the digital or in the remote learning. In the end, we did not decide to go with either of those, however. We have all been trained in the Tri-County C3 training. The three of us ladies went for 2 years, and the rest of our department went for the second year, which again was interrupted by COVID. We've been trained in cultures of thinking training since 2018, and that still goes on every single day in our lessons and within our PLCs and things of that nature. We also have been working with restorative practice training, trying to bring restorative circles into our curriculum, actually build them into our time so that kids have a chance to, just kind of get warmed up and get more comfortable. Learning goes on a lot better in this style once students are comfortable with each other. And then we're looking at trying to align everything, like Mr. Duke said, to the C3 framework, and obviously our new state standards. Over this summer, Lauren and Andrea and I spent a lot of time at the OVA conference room. By the way, very nice accommodations. Thank you very much, OVA, for letting us come in. And we started to build this curriculum. It is a long process, and we are in our inquiry pilot this year. We just successfully finished our first Era 1 Inquiry 1, or Era 4 Inquiry 1, and started our second one today. I have already seen quite a bit with the students, but we will talk about that in just a couple minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. We've been really excited about this presentation. Can you hear me okay? Like Kurt mentioned earlier, one of the major changes that we made early on when we started this process was to adjust our scope and sequence for our entire department curriculum. So while we're focusing on rewriting world history right now, we had to make this decision first. So as it stands, and in previous years, we have taught U.S. history as a 9th grade course. The reasoning initially behind that was to carry over to make 8th and 9th grade a little bit more cohesive. So U.S. history in 9th grade was like the first section, foundations, revolution, all of that, and then it carried into 9th grade where students studied a little bit more modern. In 10th grade, students took civics and econ. In 11th grade, students took world history, and then in 12th grade, they had an option to take a social studies elective. After a lot of discussion and a lot of very open dialogue between our department, we decided to adjust this sequence, as you see in front of you right here, to move world history down to the 9th grade level. This decision took a lot of different steps. We can send many emails to schools all over Oakland County. We have a massive database of how all the other schools in Oakland County do treat this. And after a lot of research, it literally is almost exactly 50-50 in terms of schools that teach U.S. history at the 9th grade level and schools that teach world history at the 9th grade level. We ultimately made this decision as a department because we wanted students to get the 10,000 foot view of the world, right? Be introduced to some of these really major concepts and patterns that we talk about in world history. Then the following year, they're able to focus it a little bit more into their own experience, into our own history, into the U.S. examples that they're more familiar with. And then by the time they're in 11th grade, we're really focusing on that civic action portion, where students are at the point where they're getting their driver's licenses, they're probably getting jobs for the first time, they're thinking about their after high school plans, they're able to vote relatively soon. And so we felt like civics and econ belonged better at an upper level so that students could then apply all of that historical background to the way that they were really going to move forward into the world. So this was the ultimate decision that we came up with. We're really happy with it. And this year, in order to get everybody on track, every single student and every single social studies teacher is teaching world history. It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's been a really good experience for us to be able to collaborate closer. It's created good things within our building. And then next year, we'll move into this sequence.
As Katie had mentioned before, we were able to pilot some sources to see how they would work in class. It got interrupted with COVID, although it was used during remote learning in 2020. And ultimately, we decided to not go with those that we piloted. And so these are some resources that we have chosen to use within the curriculum. OER, the World History Project, has been an awesome source for primary sources, lesson ideas, kind of those big overarching questions. And this is a free open source. Also, we made the conscious decision to not spend department funds on textbooks. And instead, we chose to do the Michigan Open Book Project, which is a free online textbook that if we were to use a textbook for any reason, that would be a resource available to us. We have chosen to have subscriptions to Gale and ABC Clio. These are sources that we do pay for those subscriptions, and this allows us to pull a lot of relevant articles and primary sources that we use a lot through our inquiry process. Also, we have listed there the Individuals and Societies subject guide And then we have additional department resources there that Kurt has put into an Excel doc where there's a lot more sources that we can pull from that are available to us to use. And then again, some additional sources, free sources that are online that we have been using to be able to pull from, and then also obviously aligning everything to the standards.
So as Kurt mentioned briefly at the beginning of his introduction, when the state of Michigan finally released our standards, since, like you said, the revision began in 2013, we kept thinking it was going to be a relatively quick process, and it wasn't, which gave us a lot of time to think about what we wanted to prioritize. When the state of Michigan rolled out their official high school content standards, they paired it with this that we keep referring to as the C3. C3 stands for College, Career, and Civic Life Framework. And what this is a pairing with our content standards. So this in itself is not content. Nowhere in the C3 does it explain like what happened during global trade or who fought in the Cold War. The C3 framework gives us a structure in which to create these inquiry units that we keep building. As it says here, I didn't write this paragraph, but I think that it does capture what we are attempting to do throughout our social studies curriculum really well. This is in the introduction to the C3, where it is justifying why it's paired with content standards. And like I said, we're really, it's focusing on all of the things that we say are important to us here, so that we can really build them in. It's increasing reading and writing and deep critical thinking. It's encouraging our students to be knowledgeable, active citizens, and it's working on a lot of more universal skills. The grounding thing within the C3 is what's called an inquiry arc. Like Kurt said, we could have presented right along with science, I think. I'm very, very excited to hear how closely these courses are lined up, because this is something that the students are going to be phenomenal at in the next couple of years. The inquiry arc for us is in 4 phases. Dimension 1 is when we develop the questions and ask the students and talk about what it is we want to learn about topics. Dimension 2 is where we actually get into the content, right? We talk about what actually happened in history and what were people's experiences. Dimension 3 is where we evaluate where those sources came from. We practice finding good evidence. We talk about sourcing, primary and secondary sources, how to know if we can trust sources. And then Dimension 4 is putting those things into action, right? That's the big so what question that we want to be more focused on. I think so much, especially in social studies, we got really bogged down into just Dimension 2, right? And like, if we had the time, we got around to talking about what to do with that knowledge. And so we're really, really pushing ourselves and our students to move forward into that fourth dimension.
So obviously, you can see that this is built around our world history curriculum. It is our first course that we are piloting. So we have built this around the eras that are presented through the Michigan State Standards, and then we've built inquiry questions for each era, and then within each era, we then are also doing we're doing inquiries inside these eras. So you can see kind of how it breaks down. We start with the fall of empires, and we will get to the modern age, modern world in the 21st century by the end of the year. So we just finished our first inquiry in our pilot, and we're really excited about it. All of our materials are presented in what's called the IDM, the Inquiry Design Model that you can see there on the left. And basically, we set up a compelling question for the students, and we stage the question, and then we go through a series of supporting questions, and the students are answering those questions, doing different activities. To the right, you can see the activity that they did when they did their health analysis. First with the supporting question 1, what are the characteristics of a civilization? The students actually traced one person in their group and then created an example from the empires that they were given. to show the 9 characteristics of an empire. And then they did some work with gallery walks to see the other ones. We built this all around, kind of interesting that we were presenting at the biology. We built this entire inquiry around the idea of the life cycle of an empire. So we actually started with, staging the question, looking at things that had nothing to do with history at all, caterpillars, kangaroos, life cycles of all different types of things, and had them just thinking about the idea of cycle. And then they went through and they did everything from an obituary of their empire to a autopsy to figure out why it fell. They filled out an autopsy report for the empire, and then ultimately they had to present an explanation of a life cycle. So, they were doing a lot of hands-on project-based instruction, and I've already heard such powerful conversation going on, and I teach all 9th graders, which this is a brand new thing for me. I've always been an 11th grade teacher, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. I can't believe the conversation they're already having. They're talking about things, I'm just like, holy smokes, like you're asking that question. So I've been really impressed so far. Obviously, we're 4 weeks in. We're going to continue to move forward, but it really is pushing the kids, and I like to do that. I like to push them and keep them on their toes. So. And then finally, the last piece here is for each era. There's 6 eras, like you saw in the actual curriculum. At the end of each era, they will do a project, and those are the projects that we have connected to our MYP rubrics.
Some ways that we are integrating technology into our classrooms. We are utilizing a lot of the Google add-ons. And so things like Slip and Slide, where we're able to push a slide deck to students and have the ability to push additional slides to them as they need them, and using Pear Deck and Nearpod as ways to have the class be able to interact when having any types of presentations or lecture style things. Digital binders are something that we adapted to and learned and taught ourselves last year as we were back face to face, as a way to kind of alleviate paper passing and all those things. And it's really something that we have taken away from our experience last year and have kept. So all course notes and activities to help students for assessments, projects, understanding of ideas are all housed in the digital binder that are built by us through in Google Slides. And that's an example of Slip and Slide. If we push the binder, we can slip additional pages into that binder using these Google add-ons. Also, we've used a lot of Geo Inquiry, which are short, standards-based inquiries. A lot of times this has replaced a lot of old school math work, where it's teaching math-based content digitally, where they can be able to interact with the map and move from different regions of the world to see how trade took place or events that took place during wars. And so it's replacing a lot of that math work that used to be done out of textbooks. And then lastly, using all of these Google add-ons and digital binders works really well with the use of Google Classroom. So our course is run exclusively through Google Classrooms. Students are submitting all of their graded assignments through Google Classroom and housing a lot of the work and resources that we're doing there to make it available for them.
Mr. Weaver, do you have anything to say before we put it on the floor?
Yeah, not terribly. I just want to thank the social studies department. As you can tell, they're pretty excited about this and appreciate the board's diligence and all this as well too. They've done a fantastic job of putting all this together. You can see both curriculums mirror each other in many ways with the inquiry base. I mean, I'd really say, we've been ID for 10 years, but we really haven't been all the way into ID in many aspects. You're starting to see that in many of the practices. It takes
when doing an IB curriculum and putting that all together, it's really about the philosophy and the approach to teaching the curriculum, and that takes a lot of effort and a lot of shifting and a lot of intentionality on the part of the teachers, and they've really stepped up. They have been awesome. These three especially have led the way in their department in that. And Kurt has been instrumental in leading this and keeping the group together, and that he's done a fantastic job with that. So I just want to thank them. And the level or the expectations for this curriculum are just off the chart, and look forward to seeing U.S. history, civics, and econ as they move forward. So.
Thank you, Ken, and truly thank you for your hard work. It's always tough to work outside of your own comfort zone, and not only students are doing it, but you're having to do it. So it's interesting. It's awesome. Someone want to put this motion on the floor? Eric?
Move to approve the world history curriculum for the Oxford High School as presented.
Thank you. Support? Chad, support? Any more discussion? Yes,
No, ladies first.
Thank you. I just want to state publicly that if anybody ever says to me that teachers get the summers off and they have a really cush job, I'm going to send them to the recording of this meeting. Thank you so much for all you do. This is so exciting. I want to know when we're adding virtual reality so we can just travel back to these eras and walk around on the streets, because that's what's coming next, you know, is being able to do that. So this is really great. Just as a side piece to this, I know that all of our students have the laptops. Do we have students who still like using paper? Do we make paper resources available to those who do?
So you do have those few that are traditional. I had a few last year that really just pushed back on it. The only thing that I kind of came back with them as is if they had to turn something in paper, they would have to turn it in already. So if they were doing that, I actually had them take photos last year and insert them into their binder, so I still had access, because it's really, really nice to have a conversation with a parent, and a parent can say, hey, like, you know, Jimmy's having trouble here, and I have access. As soon as, and with Google Classroom, I have access to everything. So I can go in and say like, oh, well, Jimmy's having problems because Jimmy hasn't done 5 of the 5 pieces of the work in our binder. So it's really nice for also follow-up and feedback for parents. So yeah, there is some paper, and we've transitioned back to some things. Obviously, you saw the paper, the big paper. Right. And we do, you know, like we do gallery walks and things like that. We like to have the digital piece, mostly because, you know, it's a great way for us to say, you have access to it because they have a phone. And believe it or not, half of them have figured out how to use most of their work on that little device. I don't know how they do it, but they figured it out. So, yeah.
I think my kids are one of those. Thank you also for the presentation. I don't know if that's Mr. Noose is doing. I love the links. Thank you for the links, because I like to poke around in some of that stuff too. So thank you for the interactive physical presentation in the board packet.
thank you, Mary. Dan?
Thank you. So I just got a couple of questions on sequencing. World history first, and then all the way up to, did the state of Michigan remove like a little sliver of Michigan history? I mean, is that still something that because I recall back in, you know, at some point we learned about the Indians have settled, and then you go back to.
Sure. So in terms of content standards, Michigan history is in 4th grade and in 8th grade.
Tells you where my education stopped.
I mean, it could have been different. As of right now, the current content standards, true Michigan history is in 4th grade, and then a little bit again in 8th grade when you do talk about like westward expansion, Native Americans, some indigenous peoples, things like that. So 4th and 8th grade a little bit. There really isn't much Michigan history, at least, and if there isn't any Michigan history in the high school content standards. In U.S. history, we do double back and talk a lot about Michigan being the arsenal of democracy and pull in some more local history that way.
That's kind of where I'm going, because there's a lot of things that happened in Michigan that really pushed our country forward. I mean, talking to World War, we made airplanes, and all that stuff. I don't think we need to cover it exclusively for a week, but at least to touch upon it and say, this is how this country moved forward, is Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. We have wonderful resources in this state, and we are taking advantage of that. At the world history level, we are planning a grade level, hopefully next year, trip to the Holocaust Memorial Center. We've done a lot of work with them. We use a lot of their resources, and so there are things we're very, very lucky about being close by. DIA also does free trips for schools, so that's something we've looked into. And then in addition, obviously with civics, there's also a local and state government component in civics that they'll get in 11th grade too.
Okay. And then and a follow-up to that. So when we have conversations, and I'm sure they typically get a little bit more vocal every 3.5 years in the upper grades, how do we allow those conversations to happen on both sides? The reason I think that it's important is because of what's been happening the last 5-6 years. We haven't learned to have a civil disagreement and hear both sides. And I want to make sure that our students are understanding that there are two sides to everything. And it's not just one side that has to, it's not the louder person is always the right person, is always has the right concept. So I want to make sure that our students understand that.
Well, and that's one of the reasons for the alignment, right? So the more mature a student is, the more they're getting active in there, the more information they have. Conversations typically go better the more information people have, right? So you start with the big picture, and then you narrow it down to the more regional, and then make it really personal, and then civics and econ so they can take action to that. I think we have always strove to, provide that, because like even when you're talking the framers, right, they didn't agree, they didn't like some of them ended up shooting at each other, right? So
Hope that doesn't get
so like there are limits. Well, we progress a little bit. So allowing opportunities for the alternative voice and getting multiple perspectives, which is one of the reasons really why the textbook, where you have a stagnant perspective there, you own your textbook for 7 years, these sources they're able to be adjusted, you're able to bring in different pieces, the victors, the losers, the military, the general, so multiple perspectives on all sides, and then you can create that story. So providing opportunities to do that. In fact, we've gone to, I think we've taken groups of students to the presidential inauguration every year since the first Bush's inauguration. No, actually, yeah. So we've been to Clinton, both Bushes, Obama, President Trump. We're unable to go this year because of the travel limitations. And it doesn't matter who wins. Like that's a historic event. You want to be able to be part of that. Just have to be part of history, experience those. Have Vietnam veterans come in, and have the Holocaust Memorial visit there. So providing those opportunities for multiple voices.
And that's my point. Regardless of where you sit, it's history. And we can't change where we've been. We can only hope to learn from it and move forward from the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think by showing our students that this is what it is, and letting them formulate a thought process and be able to explain that thought process that they have is important, because that's what pushes them forward as lifelong learners.
And no matter what perspective they have, being able to support that, right? And
Correct.
Being open to the other viewpoint, because you don't know if you're right until you know the other side's wrong, right?
I've been wrong once or twice.
So giving kids the opportunity, and that's why a lot of this is inquiry-based, critical thinking, and discourse, like having how to have a focus.
So was that the reasoning, was that part of the thought process from shifting that towards as they got older?
Where they're most able to do that, and
understand
where
it.
they're most allowed to do that, right? So
Correct.
This is the closest where they're able to be able to vote. We were talking about voting rights and things that they could do, but they couldn't do it really they're not able to do that for several years. Like certainly the beginnings of that, but where they're actually going out and practicing. Hopefully we get many of those standards, so we do some of the life skills too, just simple like in finance, how to fill out an application, how
things that they're going to have to do in the real world once they do it.
Should give them extra credit for actually voting. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you.
Can we move on to computer science curriculum presentation?
Yeah, both of them. We have two of them, the CSP and the CSA, and this is one together.
I have two presentations for you, and I'm going to be really short, succinct, and to the point, so that we're not here all night. So I apologize if mine are really, really short. So I'm a department of one. I'm in the CTE department, but I'm a computer programming teacher. If you remember, a couple years ago, I came and presented to you, actually, we took over and presented for the middle school program. We started introducing computer science in middle school, computer programming, and that class is growing. Now I'm presenting to you two of the high school classes, and then hopefully by next year I'll present two more to you. This is Computer Science Principles. It is the first course in the CTE field for computer programming. We cover what are the 12 segments that are required by the state of Michigan, and students are introduced to the fundamental concepts of computer science. If you look at some of your board members, they have been involved in this class. My goal for this class is to show students what technology is like outside of the classroom. I bring in industry professionals. Those industry professionals give them the experience of letting the students interview them. And then at the end of the year, the interview candidate is the student. The students are interviewed by a professional. They're getting these life skills that they need in order to be successful in the workplace. They're also learning about professionalism, how it's not appropriate to just sit and be on your phone the whole time, and making sure that they are exploring different areas of computer science. So we had Mr. Trump come in and help with his take apart computers. Mr. Griffin was on and helping with the interviews, and we can attest to what happened there. So the students learn and earn a career certification by the end of the course, and it allows them to see the various opportunities for computer science. As you know, computer science is constantly changing, and the jobs that we think are going to exist don't even exist yet. So right now, it's just me. Last year, I had 50 students, and it is continually growing. We're hoping that next year it'll be maybe 3 classes at the high school, as the middle school has right now traveling between the 2 buildings because the program is growing, and I should be at the high school next year. For the program to continue to grow. As I mentioned, it's part of the CTE segments, and we want to provide students, obviously, as much realm of computer science. It's not just sitting there in Google Docs and working on Microsoft Excel. We're getting into everything that exists with computer science. It does help the district because it increases our CTE funding and gives our students other opportunities, and Tim promotes technology, so that's a bonus. So last year was my first year teaching the class, and I had a select group of students that took the AP exam. It was by their choice for this class. This class does not require them to take the AP exam, as we know with most of our this is not an AP course, but I offered that opportunity for the students, and they performed very well on that exam. And it was the first year for me teaching it, and I can only grow from here. And the majority of students earned a certification, and you know what was going on last year, all the obstacles they had to overcome, so I was really impressed with the students walking away with the certification. And then they're going to continue. Some of these students have performed internships outside who graduated. Now they're working as interns with different companies. I introduced them to stuff like LinkedIn and showing them how to find a job and career paths of their choice. have the IB mindset, and we're working on portrait of graduates, so bonus points for that. And we cover all Michigan standards that need to be addressed. You guys went through Atlas, but I'll save you the time there. And these are the standards, the segments for the CTE realm: business communications, ethics, legal, copyright, safety. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can kind of see, and I know we have an audience tonight, so maybe they want to see some of this stuff. But we do talk about programming, and that's kind of nice. One of the major components of the class is getting them introduced to programming, but it's not just programming. There's so many other areas of computer science, and it's amazing how some of the students, they don't think they want to be in programming, and they love it, and they're connected, and I try and make sure that we also have some diversity, encouraging. It's just not the stereotype computer nerd. It's everybody that can be a computer scientist. So, and then this is an app that a student can make. They all make their own apps. This is one of the basic ones that you can kind of see, and the kids whip out their phones and they'll show, hey, will you play my app with me? And they really enjoy that. So you get to play a little game there. And then the next thing I wanted to show is that students can program in block or text-based for this course, which is really nice because the students that are really advanced, they're like, give me the text. I'm done. I don't want to do this childish block stuff. And then some of the kids doing the block are the ones getting it right, and the people doing the text are like, I'm lost. What's wrong? Well, they can switch it back and forth, which is really nice. So they get to advance at their own level and their own pace. All right, so that's the first one. Do you have any questions, or can I go to the next? I don't know how you do it.
Let's go to the second one, and then I'll ask all the questions.
All right, perfect. Thank you. No? Are you sure?
You're right.
She's the technology teacher.
You get an A.
Just say you can go home, right? All right. So with computer science A, CSA, Java. We talk about Android phones, Minecraft. Just because you play Minecraft does not make you an expert in Java programming. So they are learning how to program in Java. Students explore and further and earn career credit, college credit. I had students take the AP exam for this as well, and they all performed really well. I also had students earn their Java certification, which was kind of nice. I also had my Java certification. So students want to explore programming. They get a glimpse of what it means to be a computer programmer for a career. I work with TEALS, which is through Microsoft, and I have volunteers in my classroom, and they are working one-on-one with these students remotely, surprisingly, and because they're zooming in and talking to them, and they're getting to see different aspects of it. I don't know how much you know about computer programming, but there's different environments and you can program it. And I may be proficient in one, but these programmers can expose them. Well, you know what, if you get a job with this, you're going to work with IntelliJ, but if you work over here, you're going to work with Eclipse. And I know it's foreign language, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about. So, second semester, they also get the same experience of being interviewed and working with Java programmers and just get to learn a little bit more about that field and see if it's something they want to do. I'm the teacher one for this. It is a Q course. So if you're following the realm of CTE, this is after they have taken the 12-segment course. And then increased funding, student athletes, they can take the AP College Board exam, guest speakers, they work on a personal project they can use on their resume. Last year was kind of nice because after the seniors left, we had finished the exam and we brought in some of the graphics, the Java graphics, and the kids just beat that up, and my seniors were mad at me for not having it. I'm like, well, you can go on Google Classroom, it's still there. They didn't do that. But the topics addressed, these are Java lingos for those of you nerd types. Primitive data types, objects, conditionals, iterations, minuscule just so that they can pass the certification exam. But we don't get into some of the complex topics of job. And then those are your standards, and I'm done.
Thank you very much. One person, great, nice job. Let's put the motion on the floor and then have discussion. Someone? Thank you.
Move to approve computer programming, computer science principles, and computer programming AP CSA curricula for Oxford High School as presented.
Thank you, Chad. Support? Heather, support? Discussion? Questions that you might have? Go ahead, Chad.
Where do you know?
Yeah, this is more of a statement. The term computer geek, computer nerd, that's not a bad thing.
I know.
I know you know. Public and I'm a geek and I'm proud of it. No, but I wanted to say specifically to the curriculum that you presented. So the focus primarily is on Java.
I'm sorry, no, it is not. For the CSA, it is Java. For CSP, it's JavaScript. I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Because where I was going is, it should be, I want it to be understood that because we're focusing on, a small number of languages, that's not just teaching the kids that language. It's giving them fundamentals it's going to make it easier for them to pick up any number of other languages, IntelliJ, Ruby, Python, right? They all use very similar fundamentals, and it helps as they're, through schooling and then through their career.
Coming soon, and the next time I'm up here, we have Python, some other languages coming away.
Perfect. The other thing that I appreciate the fact that we're not just looking at programming in and of itself, right? We're looking at computer science as a whole. What are all those other career paths in computer science? Infrastructure support, all that kind of stuff. I think is great, and we've had good conversations with the kids to help them understand it and get feedback from them on all those different opportunities. So thank you. Thanks for bringing this to us today.
Thank you, Chad. Dan?
I'm not going to ask a question because I probably find out it was being taught in the first grade now. So I'm just going to ask you this. Do you see that your students are maybe doing some work in the summertime, earning money for small businesses or things like that? So they're using what they're being taught in the classroom, and they're doing summer work for.
It's not if I'm doing a bad job.
Okay.
They are.
And the reason I ask that is because I think it's really important. One of the things that you mentioned earlier is there's jobs out there that don't even exist. We don't know that they exist yet. And I was having a conversation with some friends of mine, and one of the things that we have to start to realize is that students, younger students, teenagers, are learning to make money in a world that we never had the opportunity. So they're not working in a restaurant, they're not working landscaping, and I think what happens there is that we start to think of kids as being lazy, teenagers being lazy. Now, there's just a different way to go out and make money, and that's what they're doing. And I think we need to be mindful of that, of giving them those opportunities and teaching them those things, that just because this is a class doesn't mean that you can't use it in a business environment, even if you're 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. So that's very good.
We do talk about how with the CTE program, they don't necessarily have to go to college. They can go to trade school. And some of the certifications that I offer specifically in my program, they can walk out of, hey, I graduated high school and get a job.
And that's what we really need to focus in as an educational institution, and start to pile that up with our guidance office and say, hey, let's all talk together and start saying, it's not, and I'm not putting down college, okay? That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to say is there's other opportunities, and if we're not exploring them and giving our students the opportunities to explore those because we're just focused on college, we're doing a disservice because every student learns at a different level. Some are college bound, some aren't.
And I think that's one of the reasons we offer the AP exam as an option, so if they are going to college, they can earn some college credit, but we also offer the certification. So if they don't want to use that for classes at college, they have a certification stamped, and we work on resume development, and a lot of kids, do use the skills outside.
Good, very good. Thank you.
Eric?
Hi, my name's Eric Foster, and I too am a nerd.
Hi, Eric.
So real quick, so you mentioned that you go between the middle school and the high school. So is this curriculum just high school based?
These two are, yes. The middle school we presented to you when you guys were remote, completely doing all your board meetings through Zoom, and Mr. Weaver did that presentation for you. So you didn't see me, but you saw the work that I had.
Maybe that's why it was so interesting.
Well, you can listen to him, I can believe.
No, when he presented.
No, they're just giving you difficult.
I know, so am I. Your mic isn't working, Mr. Tech.
Okay, so I'll just yell.
Just yell, it works.
So the curriculum is basic. This difference between the middle school and the high school is just a scope, right? Or is it-
The middle school is one semester, and that's just exposure to the understanding of computer science. We talk about some of the foundations and basics, just so that they get a general understanding, but kids that are taking the computer science principles, some of them have taken the 8th grade class, and some of them have not. So it's not a prerequisite for these classes. It does help, but it's not a prerequisite at all.
What is that class called?
In the middle school, it's Intro to Computer Programming. It's for 8th graders only.
Mary?
Thank you. I'm finding it interesting that we were just talking about all this technology that we use to make these classes happen, and we've just spent the last year with all this technology, and these are the kinds of things that we're making, the kinds of teachings we're making available to our students here. The internet doesn't work on its own, your laptop doesn't just work because you turn it on. There's people who put a lot of energy and knowledge into making these things work, all levels of it, from building them to programming to learning, knowing how to communicate, et cetera. So I just think that's fantastic that we have that variety. We can pull it all together with this. And even if you are going to college, if you can get a certification, you can make some nice money on the side to help pay for your college too. I used to tell people to go out and waitress, but maybe this is a better, maybe this is just not another, this is not better, it's another way that it could be something that's short term because maybe they want to go do something else. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Dan?
One more, I forgot to ask earlier. Do you see or feel as though, and this is maybe a question for Ken and Tim and everyone, do you see us having to put more resources in financially for hardware, software to get to the next level?
For this class?
For the class, in general, it just, I want to make sure that we're thinking forward, and in doing so, we're allocating enough in our budget so that we can make sure that the latest and greatest is available.
Yeah, I think we're always working on that. We just had this lengthy discussion today about technology in the department and everything. It's a very integral part. I mean, we were talking about 20 years ago how new technology was into the education field and everything, and how really people didn't quite know how to work with it, and it was almost a separate entity in its own silo. And now how it's built into everything that we do. So we're constantly looking at updating servers, switches, all that stuff, the networking, the filters, and all that stuff. Mr. Throne is helping with Sash. I can never say his last name. So, but keeping up the network and keeping that part, as well as CTE funds are instrumental in keeping up with the latest equipment. We just bought, a year ago, devices for this lab. We try to constantly keep the different aspects, the PLPW down at the middle school, as well as the intro to the computer programming class, up to date as much as possible as well too. We're looking at updating projectors, or devices I should say, in the classrooms to keep the latest and the greatest, because it is such an integral part. Kids grow up, all of mine, I've got 4 kids, every one of them is growing up with technology in their hand, it's second nature. They fix all of mine, snafus and shutting windows down prematurely, and all of that type of stuff. So it is very important and integral. So the inquiry base is important, as well as that technology aspect, because that's how they're going to be working, learning, playing, you name it, in the future. And it really is, and like you said before, and you were spot on, they're doing things that, 20 years ago, well, maybe 40 years ago when some of us were growing up, and maybe even more, did never dream of that you could do this and that you would have a device that could do all of this for you. And so it really has shifted a lot of practices, especially us older folk, in trying to get up and catch up to everybody, but we're doing it. This is what Kevin's been an awesome find. It was kind of funny, and we had struggled, fought to keep this program. Went through several teachers and trying as people left through better situations and whatnot, and we were desperate for a computer programming teacher, and scratched my head, and all of a sudden Mrs. Beasley says out of nowhere, by the way, and I worked with Mrs. Monkevich for 8 years, said, by the way, Mrs. Monkevich is certified in computer science. I'm like, what? And because we were just...
There's this thing called CTE that nobody knew what it was at the time, so
So it's a little language lesson in that, and we figured it out, and it has been fantastic having her in this role. She's been great and awesome. We got now Mr. Katie down at the middle school, now taking some of the intro computer programming class, with the hope that as this program grows, that she'll be up here where that meat of that class is there. By the way, just so you know too, as far as the CTE programs and those hands-on experiences, we have the second biggest CTE program within a district in Oakland County. We have, I think it's 10 programs, always lose track, and we're constantly looking for ways to keep that going and everything. So, and we have a huge number of kids, plus we still send kids down to Oakland schools, Texas campus as well too. So, I mean, we really have quite an effort in this area, and we will have to probably, maybe in about less than a year, or maybe a year, present to you what we're doing with some of the EDP career stuff that we're really starting to push as hard as well too, because kind of putting that all together, because yes, not every kid is made for college, but you want to make sure the kid is making that decision and not an adult for that child, and making sure they have all opportunities open to them, but at the same time being realistic. So we're really focusing on some of that, so that might be good to bring forward the work at some point. So this is my Kevin, has been awesome.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Next up is Poland. This is Shell and Hillbrook. They've got some curriculum as well.
Evening from Team OVA. We're going to be here tonight for your time. We will be talking fast to OVA so I think we can get through this. Mr. Dennis is here to be talking about some of the curriculum in the hybrid learning program. And Dr. Stephen is going to be talking about parenting law at OVA. She's joining us and is a hybrid learning coordinator, so Jordan's passing a good time. She's here to kind of learn tonight and observe a little bit. So we're super excited to present some of our new offerings and just updating on some existing curriculum. So OVA is seeking board approval to add the following curriculum to our course catalog: calculus, hybrid programs, ELA grades 6 through 12, SOAR ELA and CK12, ELA curriculum, and the BUS LMS platform for Oxford Custom LMS. We're also presenting the National Digital Curriculum from it's the SAT, ACT test prep class to replace PrepWorks. We've been through PrepWorks in the past, and now we are going to be introducing the Goosh. We've got it
3 or 4 different curriculums, vendor programs, and Goosh, kind of an interesting name, came up with the top choice. And then we have another new vendor, college, for college readiness for Bring Your Future. It's called On Track. And then, of course, Aaron as well. So for calculus, this is pretty exciting. Mr. Sawyer joined over last year, and we did not have a Oxford designed the calculus class. They had AP Calc, and we saw families. We got some feedback that there were families interested in calculus. So it's a college level course that covers concepts, and I won't read all through it, but it's essentially it slows the AP version down a bit, and so a lot of the kids seem to want, parents had expressed interest in that. So we had the calculus curriculum in there. I hope you got a chance to look at that. It doesn't look great to me, being honest. Mr. Sawyer, I've had a lot of great conversations about how we built it, what type of materials we used for that course. It is all from scratch at Oxford. It's one of our first custom courses. We're not purchasing with a vendor. The Oxford Community Schools hybrid program. Mr. Dennis is going to talk about that.
Yeah, so the first time I came up here to propose hybrid curriculum to the Board of Education, we had 254 hybrid students, so 254 full-time students in the district within this program. That was 3 years ago. As I stand before you right now, the hybrid program in the last 3 years has grown to 735 full-time students within the district. And so that program started out as a K-8 pilot, and as it's grown, we've added, those graduating 8th graders. We wanted to make sure that learning experience did not end for them, and so we've added 9th grade, and 10th grade the year after that, and 11th and 12th, and so we are now a K-12 program within OVA. And so with that, we need to add some additional curriculum options for our high school students. And so we have SOAR ELA, which is a 6 through 12 ELA offering. We are in partner with the SOAR company. It is a local curriculum company based out of Lake Orion. They are in partner with us for a study skills course that we use. We are now working with them in tandem to develop an ELA curriculum offering for one of our hybrid locations. Of course, available to anyone who wants to take it, but it is a specific location that's piloting it at this time. And so there's a couple unique things about this curriculum offering. It has large emphasis on nonfiction literature and diving into nonfiction skills. And the other thing that is really key about this is a study skills curriculum company that's diving into ELA. So designing those transferable skills, some of those study skills, concepts that help students in their learning, kind of embedding those into the natural ELA process. The third really cool concept about this program is we at OVA, we partner with families. We don't just stick a kid in front of a computer and expect them to learn. We learn with families, we partner with the family, we communicate with the family, we call parents to be learning coaches. They are part of that educational process. And so one of the things that we have been doing over the past few years is how do we make the curriculum, how do we make the learning experience intuitive to the family? And so with this curriculum, if you look at the ELA standards, the 6th grade ELA standards, 7th grade ELA standards, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're all going to have character analysis. They're all going to have narrative writing. They're all going to have expository essays. They're all going to have persuasive essays. They're all going to have plot analysis. They're all going to have the analysis of author's craft. They all have these themes and these concepts, but what they do is with each year, they cycle through, they add additional layers to those standards, they add additional depth to those standards, but the general concepts that the students are doing are the same. They just take it to the next level, they cycle. They don't write one essay and you're great at writing essays. And so what they do now is, let's make the curriculum whole family friendly. We have lots of families with 6th and 7th and 8th graders, families with 3, 4 kids, all in the secondary level. So what if your family learned about narrative essays at the same time? What if your family learned about character analysis suddenly these isolated learning opportunities and now become the whole family conversation. Granted, at each child's skill level, at each child's grade level, but if now you have a topic as a family that is, addressing the needs of the kids, it's addressing the Common Core, but doing it in that intuitive whole family fashion. So that's one of the cool, so we're working on that, we're developing this, but that's one of the cool, unique things. We have large families, we have families who we partner with, let's make it intuitive for them, let's make it family friendly. The second thing is we have CK12, which is a nonprofit company based out of San Jose State University. They produce free educational textbooks for schools and public institutions to use. They're Common Core line. We use CK12 for many other curriculum offerings. But now we are presenting ELA 11 and 12 because, well, we have the need. The other thing is we have a documented trend where writing is a target area that we want to address and improve upon. We track our writing at OVA and the skills in which students are portraying on state assessment and local assessments. So this is a CK12 curriculum that really emphasizes the writing process. It's composition focused with literature integrated into it, but really, so where are our students struggling and how do we address those needs and how do we provide additional offerings for those 11th and 12th graders. And so CK12 ELA with this composition focus is what it is, basically what we're going to use to address that. And then, thank you.
So as I said earlier, we have this new ECT prep. We've been offering that in the past for populations in the high school, take the prep as well. On our shared time schools. So we did select the booth, we gave you a login. Of course, the descriptions are listed in the open catalog, they remain unchanged. So it's really just a change in vendor, not asking for a curriculum change there. We also have a class called College Readiness. This one is specifically, units of study center specifically on readiness, so college basics, exploring pathways, selecting a college, all those steps to get a student how to, do the FAFSA, college application, so very intensive on actually getting into college. So less focus on this course on the soft skills versus other college career offerings. We had some requests for this course. It's designed for fully online students. Their video content quizzes are provided through this on track, couple of projects and assignments, just the students for their actual college application process. So we are seeking approval for what we had discussed earlier. The next slides are pointful education, OBELA, novel studies, and air law is just an update to existing curriculum that are approved by the board. Pointful is one that there was a lot of excitement when we introduced this a couple years ago. I think so many great choices. They are registered with Quality Matters, are really good, solid elective curriculum offering. So we're introducing career exploration and finance, introduction to education and teaching, and history of gaming and esports. So it's been approved, we're just updating you. Three new classes. And then also we're offering within our courses that are already approved, ELA novel studies. Our ELA teachers got together this past year, spent a lot of time on designing some units around novel studies. They have a really good time. They finally had a department because their staff grew, so it's been a great experience. They talked about that when people read, they create new pathways in their brains, and furthermore, reading improves concentration, promotes creativity, and encourages empathy. The ELA teachers are so excited to work with the students as we read these novels together and work on fun and engaging creative assignments. For 6th and 7th grade, they're going to be reading a unit study on how to read literature like a professor for kids. So lighthearted, fun, we're hoping that will generate some interest there. For 8th grade, it's called Uglies by Westerfield. You can see the summary and rationale. They spent some time and came up with this novel. Other schools in the county and across Michigan have read that book, and it's pretty stable and not controversial, and it'll be I think it'll be a nice help for the kids. And And then for 11th and 12th grade, the American Road Trip by Forrest Scott. So that one is also being introduced this year in within their Red Point class. And then I have to introduce Dr. Steven. She's been working really hard with the district team on Aaron's Law. So I'll turn it over to you.
So one of our challenges at OVA is to take, it's not necessarily a challenge, it's welcome, and we accept it, is to take something that other departments and groups in the district have created for the seated world and make it work for us in our environment. So I was lucky enough to have share with me the work of the K-12 educators who work for the seated, work to develop the lessons for Aaron's Law for the seated environment, and I was tasked with making them applicable to our setting. So I just want to give you just a brief, I guess, summary of where that is, and how that's going to work. There we go. Okay, so I want to give credit first to the Aaron's Law lesson writers that started off in the seated world. So these are the same individuals that you saw when groups from the elementaries and OMS and OHS presented to you, but I wanted to make sure they got credit because they did a lot of the hard digging, and I was tasked with kind of transitioning that. So Aaron's Law, just to kind of bring that back to your memory, is named after the childhood sexual assault survivor Aaron Mirren, and the idea is to educate students and families on abuse prevention and give them the tools to evaluate their own relationships, their own situations at home, and also to develop a safety network of trusted adults, and give them that feeling of power and feeling that they have the resources and they know where to go should they experience something like this. So starting off with elementary, the basic outline is the same for us as it was in the seated world. There will be 3 lessons each year taught by the counselors with the support from our social worker. At OVA, all students have a mentor who develops a very strong relationship with the student and the family, so mentors will be involved, and then also our family school liaison. And for elementary, our big focus is the never rule and the always ask first rule. Like, here are some things that are never okay if you deal with them, and we always need to keep your safety, or as a kid, keep safety in mind. Make sure you're asking the adult that's in charge of you. When we move to middle school, we're really looking to bridge between the elementary and the high school lessons. So we're reviewing those, keeping yourself safe, never rule, always ask first rule. But as students move into middle school, they're also starting to experience different types of relationships and learning how to evaluate those relationships and decide if they are healthy or unhealthy. And then talking about ways to stay safe, making sure that students know that they have a voice, they can stand up for themselves, and having them practice and do those things. And again, we're incorporating social worker, mentors, the family school liaison, our counselors, so that it's not just one person helping share this information with students. Lastly, high school. High school involves 2 lessons taught by the counselors with that same support group from the rest of OVA, and we're really focusing again in high school about healthy and unhealthy relationships. And again, as students move into grades 9 through 12, we're talking more about relationships potentially in a romantic sense, and talking about ways to get help. We know that those students will have a safety network of trusted adults, but also they may seek out ways to get help from other avenues as well. So we also want to make sure that families are aware of what Aaron's Law is, what the requirements are at the state, and what OVA has that will be presented to students. And so we have a plan for communicating that out to families. There is the possibility of parents wanting to opt out their student. So we have a plan in place for that. And then we also provide families with resources about how they can talk to their kids about healthy relationships. I know as a parent, sometimes I think about talking to my son about things and, oh my gosh, I need someone to tell me what to do. Even though I teach kids and teach teachers for a living, sometimes as a parent, you really question those. So we want to provide parents with those resources also. Lastly, in the presentation that was given to you, these are links to all the online, we call them rooms, haiku rooms, where the students will be going through in a digital and remote fashion with the counselors. But
I'd like to close it up and let's ask questions, please. Let's finish the presentation and then we'll ask questions. Thank you for that humor. Please, Heather.
Okay. Timing is everything, I guess. I don't ask a lot of questions, so. Okay, so because I'm super interested in this Aaron's Law, and I have been behind this from the get-go. So I know in our seated environment, this is introduced mainly in our health classes, our sex education programs, and things along those lines. And then prior to that, so prior to 5th grade, they just kind of introduced it as a teacher and how to communicate and things like that. So in a non-seated situation, so you're saying the mentor who's building a relationship with that person, maybe online or in person if they come into the lab, this would just be conversationally that they might have these introductions, or they're kind of showing them the slide, or are they emailing it to them, or kind of how are you getting it out there?
We didn't feel 100% comfortable with just saying, here are these courses, go through them.
Right. That's why I was kind of like, how are you giving it out?
So counselors are spearheading the organization of when this will happen, but the idea is that students will join various open Zoom sessions, and they will go through the content together, and the counselors will lead most of the instruction. However, because we know that mentors have such a strong relationship with students and families, mentors will be there, and it's sort of to make students feel more comfortable as well. And then also the social worker, the family school liaison, because we know that this is potentially something that could be upsetting or triggering for students. So we want to make sure that we have that whole support system there.
Without them seeing their physical reaction to reading this or hearing it. That's kind of sensitive, so, okay.
The student question, sometimes we have a lot of eyes on the kids.
Right.
We've gotten pretty good at reading
Yeah. I love it. I'm so glad we're offering it to them, because this is going on, and with all of this seated environment growing, I worry that it's going on even more, and that there's more kids getting abused, and more kids in situations that need help.
And this will be available to our graduate students as well, so we'll have an opportunity to propose it too, so depending on the pathway a family chooses.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. Anyone else? Dan?
Thank you. Since we are in a virtual environment, a lot of times a teacher or a mentor or a counselor or even a building administrator will be able to see a physical change in a student, or maybe even the way that they're acting. How do we do that in a virtual world where we only see from here up? We might not be able to see some of the things that will be obvious in a non-seated environment.
So, before I was really involved with OVA, I even had the same question that you had, but I think we're in a unique situation with OVA where I keep going back to that mentor relationship that students have with their mentor, and also their content teachers, to be honest with you. I came from teaching in the seated world, and I thought, how am I going to build relationships with these kids that I may never meet in person? And I think I can honestly say that when I was a mentor the past few years, I had stronger relationships because there's more time for us to be flexible and have smaller groups and have one-on-one conversations via Zoom, via text, and so it may not be completely full body language, but those other things that you mentioned that one of the involved educators and students would pick up on. So,
and that's the thing in our environment. Sometimes students will be more forthcoming because it's so individualized versus a class.
So there is an avenue for individual communication with somebody that they might not feel comfortable in a Zoom with a group. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I had a comment on that CK12 piece. That is, I'm just excited about a lot of things tonight. I think that's a really productive way to work with families. My kids were in seated school, but we had a focus on sitting down and having dinner together. That was the one thing we really tried to do on a regular basis. And we always had great discussions, and I think that's a great way to literally bring it home to folks, and get the families involved. And then you get kids challenging each other, who's doing it better, a sibling rivalry and whatnot. But I really appreciate that concept. And I will tell you, The Color of Water is one of my favorite books. It's great to also bring some newer literature in instead of just the classics. I think that is a modern classic. So it's great to see some modern literature in there too. Thank you.
Dan?
Thanks. You brought up a great point. One of the things that I've heard as we go around, and a lot of families chose to go to our virtual academy when the option was available to them based on last school year. And one of the things that you hear quite a bit is, I spent a lot of time with my kid, and it's not really what didn't work for us. I think it's really important that we make it we make our families aware that this is not put your student in front of a computer and run with it. This is not an easy curriculum. I think what a lot of people, myself included, would have originally thought of, have not been in this position, was, this is an opportunity for my student or my child to be in front of a computer and they learn and they're given information. OVA is not that. OVA is not, here, you're gonna be sitting in front of a computer, you're gonna digest some information, and then you're gonna go along the way. This is a very rigorous education that I don't want to say perfected, because I think that'd be getting out over the skis a little bit, but we've become very, very good at. I just think that one of the things that we need to really focus in on is giving students that don't have the family member that's going to be able to be with them, or have the educational level that's going to be able to guide them through those higher grade content. I know I wouldn't be able to teach some of my kids some of those things. So maybe we look at how do we, there's three things that you're always going to have. You're always going to have a district. You're always going to have a student. The one thing you can't guarantee is what level of participation can a parent provide. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that. And it's not because the parent doesn't want to be. It's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that parents, especially in today's world, are pulled in 100 different directions. They have to do their job a lot of times from a seated in the house while their student is learning right alongside them. We have to be mindful of that dynamic that's shifted so we can provide that.
It's definitely a choice.
Yep, it is.
Coaching is a family decision to do this. Pre-pandemic, that's what it's about. The family that chose to take on that. It's really heavy role, right?
But also, it's those conversations with the families, they go both ways. If we suspect, and through our PSS process, which is fabulous, by the way, if we suspect that a parent cannot work with their child, then that triggers multiple conversations. What can you work? What can you do with your child? And whatever you cannot do, it's our legal obligation to provide the rest. It's not, there is no, the parent can't do it, so it's half an education. It's that triggers the process where it informs us that we need to fulfill the rest of the obligations.
But that brings out the point that one of the things that school districts need to do is they need to learn what the pandemic brought forward and not look at it as a bad thing. Look at the positives. Look at the positives and how do we make those positives part of our everyday education? How do we look back and say, this shifted here and this is the way things are going to be? How do we unpack that and say, we can do it better than what we did before? And by being in that environment all last year, in a seated environment, and we went through the whole thing, and we learned a lot as a district, and I think OVA is part of that learning process too. So I think it's a challenge, without a doubt.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Someone want to put this motion on the floor? Heather?
Move to approve calculus grades 6 through 12, SOAR, ELA, CK at 12, ELA, SAT, ACT test preparation, college readiness, preparing for your future curricula for Oxford Virtual Academy as presented.
Thank you very much. Is there support? Dan, support? Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, our last presentation, and first before I do that, I just want to thank Bowman. They did a fantastic job and been working hard. I do apologize to the board. We've been working on this curriculum, and a lot of it was supposed to come up in June, July, but with everything going on and everything, they kept needing more time, and so it kind of built all up on us, and so we had to get through it all, especially at the start of the year. I want to thank them. They did a fantastic job. The Aaron's Law curriculum stuff is amazing. I mean, we had a lot of questions over, like, how are you going to take this and put it in this virtual environment, and it just knocked it out of the ballpark. So, appreciate you approving all of it, and now we're going to have this present the goals.
All right, it's good to be back. I was going to say save the best for last, but I'm not sure that's true with this topic. So, I come to you tonight to share some similar goal setting that we had are being required by the state. Last year, the goals that we set for academic goals were required of us under the extended COVID-19 learning plan. This year, we shifted under a different section, under Public Act 48, which falls under the state aid that we receive. So in order to receive our state aid funding under this article, we must set educational goals. So this is very much like what we did last year that we reported to you back on in February, and then in June, I don't know if you remember all the TWI and the goal setting that we came back to. We don't have to do the TWI piece, but we do have to do the goals. So we really kind of fell back on and mirrored what we did last year, because that was successful for us, and we set very similar goals for this year. In addition, each building has their school improvement goals, as you heard Mr. McDowell share just for Leonard tonight. And then all the teachers also set individual student learning objectives based on their student data. We'll be back in February and in June to present how we're doing the progress on our goals. So these are the seated goals. So we set them again for mid-year and end of the year for reading and math. And once again, we're using our screener assessment of the Fast Bridge in A reading and A math. Our data, we looked at our data from the spring of last year and kind of what our trajectory was last school year. And we set again very similar goals for this school year. We were ambitious last year. We want to be ambitious again this year. We have some acceleration work to be doing, and so we set a high standard for ourselves. As far as the virtual setting goes, OVO will once again in math be using NWEA. That is their screener there. But this year, they're making a shift in their reading screening, and they're going to use a more personal reading assessment to screen students at OVO using a Montessori challenge, which involves reading with students and reviewing students on reading behaviors. And we think that they'll have a better idea of the needs of their students sooner than maybe some of the data that we had received through NWEA. I did put a statement here that we're going to have to come back and share with the mid and end of the year goal with you, because this is a new assessment as far as the way that they're going to be using it this year. And so we did not feel comfortable setting a goal when we don't really have the baseline data. So once that's all completed, and I received an email from Mr. Dennis earlier, I know he's already compiling the data and is looking at the trends. I'll be back and I'll share what that goal is for you.
Thank you very much. Any quick comments or questions?
Is the goal versus the baseline set based on state requirements, or is it just we need
Based
to,
on our own student.
okay, so it's on our own student data, and we're not waiting for any information to come down from the state on what their requirements are for a seated, for state aid?
No.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barna, Finance and Operations, or do we have something else?
We have nothing for me this evening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pass?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. Jill Lamont?
Hey, I just wanted to give a quick safety update. I don't have anything new really on the COVID front, but I did want to mention I've had several parents actually contact our office this week in the last couple of days, specifically about vaccinations and about having vaccines in the school, some sort of a vaccine clinic or some sort of compulsory vaccination for students. I just want to let everyone know, the public know, we have nothing in the works, towards that goal, and I've heard nothing from the county about that. So I guess I just want to sort of address that fear that I've heard. Again, multiple families already have reached out and said they're not comfortable with that. We have no inclination of that something coming down the pipe to us at all, and no goal of doing that here. So.
There's white posters right there. There's these little white cards.
That's all I have.
That's it?
Can I ask a question though?
Yes.
So families are calling the office, or calling your office to see if we're administering vaccines at the schools? I just want to make sure I understand.
My understanding was they had heard, through the grapevine that Oakland Schools was providing a vaccine on our campus, and that we would be providing it to students, and we are not.
And we have jurisdiction to say yay or nay on that, correct, Tim?
I don't think legally we can.
But if the county says, we're going to come on your campus and we're gonna administer vaccines, we can say no, yes or no.
Correct.
Okay.
But I don't even think it's legal to even get that far.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
In any event, we can't administer any sort of medication that can
Correct.
make a student aspirin or headache without written parental consent.
I just want to make sure because, sometimes people get the grapevine and the county, I don't know, I'm just going to not say anything. Take a
Yes, ma'am.
page out of Jill's.
I had a question. I too have had several parents reach out to me. So I know last year we did kind of a mask break schedule, especially for, the middle schoolers and the high schoolers who don't get recess. So I have heard that those are not going on. I have both a middle schooler and a high schooler. I know for a fact they are not going on. So they are not give them mask breaks.
So I can address that.
So where are we at on that?
Yeah, that's in our FAQ too. When we talked at our principals meeting, our administrative meeting about this, students are absolutely welcome to ask for mask breaks, similar to how they've asked for a bathroom break now this year. And all of our staff, especially the secondary level, have been told to make sure that they get at least 1 hour if they ask for them.
Why should they have to ask?
Excuse me.
So.
This is not public participation now.
So last year when we had the block schedule, we had that additional time in the class and the large class hours that we thought the students needed to get out. Now they only are ever sitting in one classroom for less than an hour on any level. And like you said, movement at the elementary level to go outdoors and things like that. So, but if a student needs a mask break, we would certainly encourage them to ask for one. And I've talked to a lot of families about that option. Our teachers know about that. Our administrators are very supportive of that.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Do you still have something under school of choice?
Yeah, I just wanted to make you aware we'll be asking for a vote next meeting about the school of choice memo for second semester. We don't typically get more than a handful of students, but I did want to give you our recommendations from the student service department that we open for school of choice semester 2.
Next board meeting?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Anything else before?
Is that being opened up because of the situation with the, or is it just, it's open, it has nothing to do with making a shift with the county saying, we want to have masks and all of a sudden.
Just their normal process.
Okay, I wanted to be sure because I don't remember it being mid, just shortly after the school year.
Oh, I got you.
Okay. For second semester. We have actually put it up in the schedule for the board meetings for that, so we're probably about a month earlier than usual.
Okay, all right. I always remember it being a little bit later.
Anything else for Jill? Thank you. We move on to number 10, policies. Heather, you typically take care of these for us. We want to hit that?
Yep, move to approve the second reading of policy number 0122, board powers, 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education for programs or activities, 6320, purchasing, as presented.
And is there support? Mary, support? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Everyone, thank you very much for your patience. We're going to go into unscheduled audience participation. We're going to take about a 5-minute break for me to get to the cards and get them sorted out and everything. Work your way back in here, stretch a little bit, and let's get back in here and take care of unscheduled audience participation. Thank you.
We have to adjourn.
No. No, we don't.
Back from our break and back in session. Just so you know, we have also scheduled,
There we go. We have also scheduled or had on our schedule a closed session in which we have to work on Tim's evaluation. We do that quarterly, and so that's something that we're looking at getting done still tonight as well. We've got a number of people that want to discuss. One of them is on curriculum. The rest are on masks. I would like to have an opportunity on behalf of the board to simply clarify a few things before you guys get a chance to speak. We are, and I'm very proud of this board, the same board that 2 years ago had the second half of a school year affected heavily because of the COVID situation. We're the same board that worked hard to make sure that we were one of 2 districts in Oakland County to remain open and have in-class education all of last year, living with all of the restrictions that we needed to live with, working our behinds off, and not so much us, but all of them, to make sure that our children would not be learning from a computer screen, but would be learning from a teacher face-to-face. We are the same board, led by Mr. Throne, that all summer long was asking the Oakland County Health Department for some type of dialogue. All summer long. Haven't heard from you. We'd like to hear from you. What's the plan for this coming year? I need you to know that at 3:30, the day before school started, we finally heard from them. We were as shocked as you were as to the timing and all that had to happen. I want you to know that if I go back a year, let me put it this way. Since COVID began, there is not a unified understanding of what's going on or what should happen. Our teachers' union is divided. Our administration is divided. The personal views of board members are divided. What we did was chose to put our personal views aside so that we could have kids go to school and learn face to face. That was and always is our objective. So when a mandate comes down 12 hours before school's going to start, we probably rushed a couple comments, emails, we straightened them out by the end, and we apologize for some of that, but just know we were as caught by surprise as you were, knowing for us, school was starting the next day. I think wisely, we put the brakes on any changes and said we're going to give ourselves a few days to digest and think about these things and get them into play, because we've always worked hard to get everything into play first, and we were going to chase our tails if we tried to push a mandate almost while kids are already going to sleep. So what I want you to know is that we did not vote or create the mandate. We're simply adhering to it no differently than we adhered to all the rules the last 18 months. I need you to understand that. We're the same board you applauded a year ago. When our attorneys told us what you would face if you went against a county emergency edict, and they are the following: that number one, you lose immunity. What that means is, in the current situation, whether it's we were masked or unmasked, if we simply comply to the state or comply to the county, then if something were to happen inside of our schools, we would have immunity because we're simply following directives, and your lawsuit would go to the Oakland County Health Department or to the state. If we defy the order, then the school district is now getting that lawsuit, not the state. And so that was point number one. Point number two, that if they wanted to make us a spectacle or teach us a lesson, they could fine us $1,000 a day per school for noncompliance. And then lastly, for all of us on the board, we could shut your schools down. Was unacceptable because that defied our number one objective, which is to make sure kids were in school. I just want that to be a precursor. I'm not expecting apologies on Facebook for misquoting and misunderstanding what the board did. But I'm hoping you understand we thought through this really hard. And ultimately, I would tell you that if you have skin in the game, it's not with the school board. It's with those who make mandates. We did not make it. We're adhering to it so that we can open up school and have kids come in every day. And as I said, there's differences on this board. There's differences in this faculty. There's differences in the administration. And obviously, there's different opinions in society. And that's okay. But we're not getting into the business of deciding that. We're not going to debate that. Our number one objective is to make sure your kids can get on a bus or get to a school and have an education face-to-face, just like we did last year. So with that, I just wanted you to be aware. So as we go into this discussion time, if you come up to the microphone and talk, there's a little mechanism right there. Don't get shocked when a little orange light goes on. It simply means that Secretary Schaefer is, there it is. She is, got a timer. You have 5 minutes to get your point across. I want you to know that you're talking to me. As a chairman of the board, you're talking to me. We're listening. We're writing notes down. You'll hear me repeat Rogerianly your comments, your thoughts, to make sure that we understood, that I understood, and then the next person will speak, and the next person will speak as we get through the list. There are probably people in this room that disagree on the subject. We're going to mutually respect one another. We are not going to interrupt one another. Your conversation is with me. You do not turn around and sling things at your opposition. We are not going to do what has been done in other districts. We're Wildcats. We're Oxford. We're one big family, and we got an issue in the middle of the family, and we're going to talk about it. But please, let's have a civil decorum, mutual respect, and let's get through this time. Because you spent all this time here because you want to be heard. Please make it possible that I can hear you. With that, I think we have one that isn't about the mask mandate. Linda Evans, you might have a curriculum question. I figured I'd let you go first and not have to wait for all the others, if that's your choice. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly, is it?
Yes.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
And you.
I enjoyed what you just said. I appreciate what you just said. And I may not have, well, I guess it is a question. I'm just a little bit confused when I watched the presentations about the curriculum and whether this was the approval night for everything getting approved with all of their hard work. I'm assuming that that's what happened tonight.
It is.
And the amount of work and the amount of dedication that the teachers did was just phenomenal. That speaks for itself. What I was scratching my head for a while because I wasn't quite sure whether I was understanding it correctly, that it's going to be a curriculum that's going to be structured in the Michigan Open Books Project. And in other words, that means it's going to be online.
Say that again.
The Michigan Open Books Project.
And that means it's going to be what? Online?
Or that. Well, that's what I'm trying to ask this your group about. So I was trying to understand it. And if we are going to depend on our children, I'm speaking for my grandchildren because I am in this district now. But so one of the little blurbs said you can save your district thousands of dollars on textbooks. But if all of the children are going to be taught and are going to be depending on the curriculum of the Michigan Open Books Project, then I would only ask you to look into who is funding that initiative, who authors the content. The best that I could see was that it's Google, or structured heavily in Google. And if that's the case, then we need to, you being board members need to feel, if you're comfortable with that, would you rely on Google to educate your children and be able to go back to that information without a textbook? And that's it.
All right, so I just want to make sure I understand, because I think what you're saying is that if we have a hardbound textbook, that is something that faculty and people can turn the pages and look at and see and evaluate. You're wondering, because we're moving into some virtual textbooks like the Michigan Open Books, who's funding that type of a software program, and who supplies, probably most importantly for you, the content, and how is that content reviewed if it's virtual?
You articulated it very
Okay, so,
And we trust those people. It's a moving target if it's on data. If the kids can't even have a hard copy, or if you want to go back and just double check, gee, what are they teaching those kids? It could be an elusive concept, is my concern. And really, that's all I have to say. I don't have a solution for any of it, really.
well, but you're raising a question that I think can indeed be answered here in the near future, is can this type of a curriculum be evaluated as specifically as a physical textbook? That's what you're looking for.
Well, and I guess not to be critical of all of you up there, because you're doing a job that I wouldn't be able to do, but, you know, to just see it, that was great, everybody did a great job, and yes, it's passed, without even knowing some of these acronyms that go with it. You know, the ISD, the TRIG, the SEK. They might be fabulous organizations, but we just don't know.
Understood. So, in the next little bit of time, we'll be getting with Mr. Weaver and others and look at how the evaluation process goes for something that isn't a physical textbook, and how do we judge the content. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The next one is, it's one of two and two of two. Marcy and Peyton. Marcy and Peyton.
Thanks for the time. My name is Marcy Enriquez, and I have to say I was extremely disappointed in the new mask rule that you implemented based on Oakland County Health Department mandates. You say you've exhausted all your resources and you have no choice but to comply. You've addressed some of that tonight. Compliance is what has gotten us into the situation we're in now. Too many people blindly plowing along without questioning. There are other school districts that have sued their local health department to stop these illegal mandates. Why can they bring about a lawsuit, but you say you can't, and you're out of options? I'm not sure if you're aware of what's happening in the Troy School District, but there is a group of parents that have been filing police reports against the school for the mask mandate, and this is causing a lot of chaos. I believe that you as the board don't want the mask mandate because you're not aware of them. And the teachers that came up and spoke before, they were taking their masks off as well. I don't think they must want them either, otherwise they wouldn't be taking them off. So I implore for you, please find an option to stop these mandates. Otherwise, I believe that there will start to be a lot of actions that are taken against the school according to Michigan School Code 380.1307B. It states, schools are prohibited from, among other things, forcing any restraint that can negatively impact grading, aka a mask, even during an emergency. Parents are getting ready to pull their kids, not because they don't want them here, but because they do not want to stand by letting their kids be subject to this abuse anymore. I have many sources I can share with you, but here's one from the government's own NIH, the National Institute of Health Studies. On a study they conducted from 2000 to 2019, showing mask wearing side effects, just a few. Blood oxygen depletion causes, respiratory impairment, headaches, dizziness, restlessness, tingling, pins and needles, difficulty breathing, sweating, tiredness, increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, coma, asphyxia, convulsions. Christine Megan Kelly, senior industrial hygienist, has testified to board meetings, or at board meetings, to the lack of effectiveness of the mask and how they do not help at all in the manner they're being used. You should look her up. So many experts spoke at the Oakland County Commission meeting last week, and you can watch and listen to that meeting for yourself on YouTube. And the most alarming thing to me is a study that has shown the increase in suicide and suicide attempts to kids due to all the damages COVID restrictions are doing to our kids. One of them being the mask. You can look at studies done by Jay Murray, MD and MD-PH out of Boston Children, the American Academy of Pediatrics. The CDC is quoted as showing an increase from winter of 2019 to the winter of 2020, a 39.1% increase in suicide attempts in school-age kids and teens. COVID is not killing our kids, the restrictions and mandates are. People are blindly following along with these recommendations, but if they would do their own research and rely on experts and not mainstream media, they will see this is what it is. An overstep of the government and the powers that be to control our lives and our kids. Not everyone will do this research, and they will always believe in the safety of the mask. That's okay for them. Choice is what America is about. Did you know that in the United States, annually 0.2% of 100,000 children, of 100,000 children have died from COVID. Most of them had some kind of pre-existing conditions. More have died from the flu. And here's some food for thought for you. You can save more children from dying by putting money into swimming pool awareness, as more kids die from drowning in pools than they do from COVID. What's next? Close the pools? Where is the line? Where is your line in the sand before you decide to stand up? As of now, it's obviously not the mask requirements. What about vaccine mandates? If you think that's not coming, look at what just happened. Vaccine mandates for employers of 100 plus employees. I have learned never say never, that won't happen, especially when it comes to my child. Our kids are too important to let that happen. They need normalcy, and you have the ability to help them get it. I asked you what side will you fight for? The kids, or an overreaching health department, and a government that thinks they can tell us what is best for our own children? I know what side I'm on, and your side will determine what my next steps are, and along with a whole lot of other families in the Oxford School District as well. Thank you for your time.
Marcy, thank you. Would you give me that, the citing, the 380?
380 dot, it's in the Michigan School Code.
Yep.
380.1307B.
7B.
Yes.
Okay.
I can bring you the copies if you'd like.
Thank you. And I want to make sure that I heard you. You said that complying is the problem, and you're wondering why we, like other districts, aren't suing the Oakland County Health Department.
I realize you mentioned the reasons why you think that you can't, but other schools are doing this, so why do they think they can, and how are they able to do this and we can't? There's actually a lot of lawsuits that are now being brought up by parents suing the health departments, parents that don't are suing the schools. I don't think you guys are necessarily the problem. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I'm fearful that you were backing down when you don't necessarily have to. You fought hard as a state in school. We need to fight even more to get these masks off of them, because this is just one step. What's next? They lulled you into thinking you're fine for the new school year. And look what they did at the 12 hours, literally 12 hours before. You guys, I feel for you. I wouldn't have wanted to have gotten that call. And then, of course, have to deal with all of us parents. But you can't stop. You cannot just give up and say, they said we have to. Other school districts aren't. You will have so many parents backing you. I promise you will have. There are resources out there. I'm happy to share what I've learned from other school districts as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's one of the things I wrote down, is that you're asking us to find an option to help fight back. You brought about the NIH study of the mask and side effects. Certainly the suicide rates that seem to be up in the last 18 months versus the 18 months prior. The what's next. The one thing I would want all of you to know is that we haven't stopped talking to the Oakland County Health Department. There have been letters from Tim's desk, letters from Jill's desk, letters from my desk, asking for questions, clarifications, proof of what, documents, what made the decision. So just know we're not passive. We just can't tell you everything we're doing.
Are you doing this for Freedom of Information Act, asking them what their sources are, because their sources are faulty?
Well,
and there's plenty more sources showing that.
I understood the Freedom of Information Act is something that can be used. We just have a right to know the information because they're mandating it to us. Freedom of Information Act would be great for you, right, to be using. So thank you. And any information that you would want to share, please do. Is this your daughter?
Yes. Who would I forward that to? Who do I bring it to?
You can send it to me. My email address is on the website. Okay? Thank you. Yes, young lady. Peyton, is that your name?
Yes.
My name is Peyton Julius. I'm in 8th grade, and this is my mom, as you know. And I personally am an 8th grader, and I know quite a few other people. Like, I think I could probably speak from what I of being protected by masks if you never tried without having a mask. And there's COVID Delta, like now apparently there's COVID Delta. Who's saying there's nothing stopping COVID from becoming an upper variant? So it's going to become like a COVID junior, a COVID number 3, and then we're going to keep getting masks. If you guys keep getting in like this, like, you don't keep fighting, then I think the health department are going to realize that they won, and they're going to keep enforcing however they feel like they should. Sorry. And the masks are kind of like, yes, they are kind of a breathing problem. Like, a lot of kids are pulling it below their nose because they're having trouble breathing, and I know, and I can speak for, I can speak for maybe like 25% to 50% of the school when I say that a lot of kids in the school have developed anxiety and depression throughout their journey of life, but like that's kind of, you're going to develop that at some point. Like, so a lot of kids do develop it at some point, but the masks are not helping, because like when you get, like even for me, when I get stressed at school, sometimes I can start to have a bit of a panic attack, and breathing is a big part of that. If I can't take deep breaths, my anxiety just builds up and up and up until I start falling in front of the whole classroom. So, and like with my mask, I can't take deep breaths, because the mask just goes in my mouth and comes out, and I can't really breathe, so I pull it down below my nose or whatever, and then my teachers tell me to pull it back up. So, and like, yeah, we can go on mask breaks and stuff, or hold our mask down for a few seconds, but that's not a lot of, like, because I'm not very good at calming myself down when I have anxiety, and I know that not all kids are, so it can be like something that can just escalate for around 5 minutes, and I can't, and I'm not allowed to be on a mask break for 5 minutes, so I'm supposed to be running the class, and that can be difficult when we're in a big lesson, and all of a sudden I start getting stressed. And another thing is, not a lot of people, I guess, hear us kids, because we're kids, and what do we know? Because we've only been alive for around 13, 14, 15 years. So we haven't learned everything about life, but we do know that that basic breathing and stuff like that requires like taking deep breaths and breathing in and out, and the masks are kind of stopping that. So it's a little bit harder to breathe with those on, and then it's cold to bring it back up. And then also one other thing, besides masks, is the Honor Society. You guys took that down last year, and I heard it because a lot of parents were complaining about it because their kids were doing like not so good, and it was like kind of like braggy. But it's really not. If your kids are upset because they get into the Honor Society, then what they can do, they can ask for teachers for extra credit. They can ask to get help. And then the kids that do deserve it because they worked hard and they got like a 4.0 or an 8.9 or whatever, and got like a gold honors or silver honors, they deserve to be rewarded for that and pointed out because they did so good and they tried their best. And then some kids that maybe didn't do as well, even though they tried their best, if they really wanted to get an honor society, they could ask, they could constantly email their teachers, they could always ask, they could always see for extra credit to try and get more help. So they could make it to honor society. So I think that, I personally think that's one thing that should come back. And if kids need help, then kids should ask for help, because we're not incapable, we know how to ask. And we also need help from the parents, because not a lot of people are going to listen to kids because we're kids, so we really need parents' help to enforce this. So, and some of them are not as talkative, and some of them are more shy and all that, but if I'm an 8th grader and I can come up here and talk in front of over 100 people, then I think you could too. Okay, that's my time. Thank you.
Hey, Peyton, come back to the microphone just for a second. I want to make sure that I always do this with everybody, right? You deserve to be heard, and I want to make sure that I heard you. The first thing you said is that, why isn't it just a choice? If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't want to, don't want to, but, right? I mean, that's one of the things you said. You also mentioned the fact that where's the study of no masks compared to a study with masks, and the comparison of the two. I got that. The fear, will it ever end when you got variants coming after variant after variant. Then you got into a section where, for a lot of kids, it's just tough. It's tough to have, it's tough to breathe, the breaks don't seem to be enough, and there's anxiety that's rising within the student population because of these things. You even mentioned the fact that near panic attacks because of just, it gets a little overwhelming. One of my favorite lines is, who's listening to us? Good point. And then you got into the canceling of the Honor Society, and where that's probably a highlight and something that we might consider to bring back. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I know my friend, she works so hard to get her 4.0, and the day that, pretty much the day that she got her 4.0 and school was almost over, the Honor Society was canceled and she couldn't get into it, and I felt really bad for her.
Understood. And the last thing I want to say is, your mom should be proud of you, and I'm proud of you. You did a great job. Thank you very much.